Missing 411, Eastern United States by David Paulides. A Case Study, Part 2. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Angels and Demons and Monsters and Serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Everest Plateau. And I feel like I've been in this studio a lot lately.
Yes, sir.
I spent most of the weekend working on some science fiction I had read. I'm like testing some stuff out and cleaning them up a little bit and posted them to the Patreon feed. So if anybody's interested in that, interested in me experimenting with reading fiction, you can go check that out on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Brothers of the Serpent. Plus there's other, normal podcasting Patreon episodes there as well. So yeah, check that out. But yeah, I spent most of the weekend, and then Kyle and I were working on music as well. So that was fun.
Yep.
Pretty much finished out the vocals, at least for mine, unless we come across some corrections we need to do later. But other than that, we're pretty much done there.
Yeah?
Yeah?
Yeah, I actually ended up redoing a bunch of stuff, of my stuff, last night and the night before. Sounded cool.
Yeah?
Came with some new ideas.
Yeah?
Got the first track sent off to Mix Engineer.
That's right. Yes.
For a test mix. And yeah.
Yeah, so that he's doing the mix down, right? Basically, that's what it's called. And then after that's all done.
The first song I sent him was 59 tracks. And he was happy. He was like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, that was better than what I thought it was going to be. It's like, okay, cool.
Oh, he thought it was going to be more tracks?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so once he's done, then you guys will send it off to be mastered, and then there's what? Then there's just publishing.
Well, yeah, publishing. We'll have the digital master, and then we'll be looking into getting vinyl.
So what goes into the mix down? Like you send it to somebody and they specialize in equalizing
Mixes,
the levels.
Yeah. Like you got to find, for example, you'll take a drum set and it has all these frequencies. The cymbals are real high frequency, the kick drum's low, the toms are low, the snare is mid and highs, and then you've got vocals, which, if you're singing high, there's a lot of crisp, high frequencies in the vocals that for clarity. It's like, where do you put all that? Because guitars are a lot of highs and mids.
Yeah.
So once you get all this stuff stacked on top of itself,
it can merge and become muddled.
It's like all just jammed in there. So they specialize in kind of knowing how to treat the audio in such a way that you can bring all these details out in the final mix and everything's clear.
So that the human ear can hear it and distinguish between the different parts without things merging together and becoming mushy.
Yeah.
Huh. And then the mastering is just what? Like
that's
making it work for standard stereos or something?
Mastering is a standardization for sure, but then there's also, once you get the mix, the whole mix, you have basically a 2-channel file. It's stereo. There's a left and a right channel, channel 1 and 2. They'll take that.
You guys aren't going to do 5.1? Want to listen to surround sound?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So the mastering studio will take that audio and in some cases they'll break it up maybe into frequency bands. So they'll think about the speaker system that you might have that has crossovers that separate out the bass, sends the low end to the subwoofer, the mid range to the normal speakers, and then the high range to the tweeters.
Yeah.
So mastering is sort of set up to deal with those bands and get them sounding as equalized as possible.
Yeah.
And then also bring the volume up to a standardized level, like a decibel level at a certain.
Okay. So it's this basically, it when people put it in, they're not like, wow, this is a lot louder or quieter than
the previous album I just listened to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So mastering is definitely a standardization, but there's there's more to it than that. You can really bring out a lot of aspects, or just, brighten up a mix, or maybe if it's too bright, you can kind of subdue it, because they'll be looking at those frequency bands and seeing, oh man, the high end on this album is like way up, on this mix is just too high. Let's bring that down.
Pull some dog biscuits out of that one.
Yeah, exactly. The old DBs. Yep.
All right.
I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do it a little bit, but not really. It's just totally.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a difference between being able to do it a little bit and then professional people who get paid to do it for a living.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's like specialized equipment and.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes.
Yeah. So you guys were looking at the possibility of an analog mix. And
going into a studio with a big,
giant
analog board and running it all through the board, which would be awesome, but it's prohibitively expensive. So,
and there's the problem of, you were telling me, like once the project for that particular song is done, and then they move to the next song, the board gets zeroed
reset,
out, and you lose the settings. Whereas if it's being done digitally, they can just pull those settings back up and mess with it again.
Now you could write down all the information on the board and everything you did, and you could technically bring it back to what it was, but it would take a long time and it's expensive.
Yeah.
So we're looking at other options. We're going. There's really good, digital plugins now that emulate a lot of these high-end outboard gear.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That was the rock and roll update.
Rock and roll update.
So it's happening, folks.
Yeah, it's finally happening.
Yeah, the pretty much most of the recording, except for little touch-ups, possibly here and there, are done, and we're in the final stages now of getting this thing produced. Okay. Agriculturally, what's going on? We're getting close to harvest. I saw you tested some juice.
Yeah, we got 17.4% sugar in the Merlot grapes.
Hey.
And 15.8% sugar in the cab.
Targets like 22 to 26, something like that.
26 would be nice. Yeah.
Right. But last time we pulled them at 24.
24.
Yeah.
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 I'd like to have them a little higher, especially the cab. Like the cab, that green bell pepper smell in the cab.
Yeah.
Smell taste.
Mm-hmm.
It's young. It's a ripeness factor.
Yeah.
So if we can get the cab more ripe, so the seeds are brown and the sugar levels are high, the pH will also be high.
Yeah. But we can
Which
fix
sucks.
that in early.
We might.
I mean, we could
Depends
try to
on
fix
how
it
much
in
magnesium gets jammed in there with it.
Yeah.
But but that flavor profile, there's just not much of a way to deal with it other than blending it into something else. So if we want to make a varietal cab that's going to be good to stand alone, I think this time we're going to let that fruit hang and just we'll be looking at it and we'll be scared that it's like rotting or something. And take it off.
Making raisins.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll be testing all week and testing next week. And
are we going to try to get a harvester for some of it?
Yeah, for sure. I've been talking to the harvester guy.
Okay.
So I'll get him, once I have 2 test results, right? I have the dates that I took one test, and then I have the dates that I take the second test. So I can say, okay, in 4 days, this is how much sugar was added to the grape.
Yeah.
So then you can
it rains for 2 days.
Yeah. But then we can kind of get a projection. Okay, maybe it's going to be a week.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to be 2 weeks. So we might be looking at an early harvest.
Yeah.
Which is surprising.
Yeah. Considering all the
to
rain.
me, but talked to Bill and he was like, yeah, well, we've had some early ones.
Yeah.
He was thinking too, because of the freeze, it might be pushed back, but it's not looking that way.
Doesn't look that way. Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
Start charting those test results and try to figure it out.
Yeah. All right.
Got some yellowing in the new vineyard, and I was looking this up. The leaves are turning yellow, and they have all along the veins of the leaf, it's dark green, right? But the rest of the leaf is pale and light yellow colored. I was looking that up. It's an iron deficiency.
Oh.
So we've got patches of this all over the hillside vineyard.
Okay.
And so I was like, well, Dan sells iron ore, so I'm just gonna grab a bunch of
just drop it back.
But I talked to Bill, and he's like, no, it's got to be collated, maybe is what it's called. I can't remember what the term is, but so anyway, we went down to Allied Ag and got some bags of this iron stuff. It's like in a dirt form or whatever, and you mix it with water, and we can inject it, which makes it way easier than having to go shovel out iron ore.
Let's see.
Granules on the ground.
Collated. Collect and combine in proper order. Is that the right word?
I don't know if I got the right word, but it's got to be combined with something else in order to make it be able to be for the plant to have uptake.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the iron ore is the Fe3, the magnetite, just won't. I mean, you put that stuff on the ground, it doesn't even rust. Like it's
bound.
pretty stable.
Yeah, it is stable. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. Another definition of this word is appoint a member of the clergy to a benefice.
I'm probably using the wrong word.
It must not be the right one.
Well, so that's the ag update, and I think that's about it.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do Space Weather News from spaceweather.com. X-Flare Sunspot returns on July 3rd. Sunspot AR2838 unleashed the first X-Flare of solar cycle 25 and then promptly departed on a 2-week journey around the far side of the sun, and it's back. The formerly flaring sunspot is quietly rotating over the sun's northeastern limb. It has spent its fury since we last saw it, or does some remain? Stay tuned. Also, there was a space station solar flare, quote unquote, solar flare on Friday. I think I saw this because I was out watching the sky in the early evening, and I'm pretty sure the ISS was up there. I thought it was a satellite, kind of tracking along. And then it just flared enormously bright. I mean, it got really bright and then faded into nothing. And I was like, whoa, that satellite just exploded, right? But yeah, apparently... the IS
lab, dude.
Yeah. It rotated a specific way and perfectly reflected the sun from one of its solar panels back down on Earth, and that light passed along, and a bunch of people caught it in telescopes and stuff.
Okay, so is
that's what they call an iridium flare.
All right. So that could be some of the flashers. You see the little flashing lights.
This was not like the flashers I've seen. I mean, it was clearly a satellite, and then it slowly. It more than doubled in brightness and then faded out.
Okay.
So the flashers we've seen just go bink.
Yeah.
They're come on and off really fast. So yeah. Anyway, they're saying that this is due to a new addition to the ISS, a rollout solar panel called iRosa. iRosa is the newest addition to the ISS. It's a solar panel that literally rolls out like a paper towel in front of the station's original aging solar arrays. So
I think I saw when they were installing that.
Yeah. So they unfurl it, and it's much more reflective and bright than the old ones. So, what, did you have a joke? Yeah. I can tell by his face that he was actually making a joke there.
I'm not going to make it.
Okay. Current conditions, solar wind speed.
I'll tell you what the joke is in the break.
Okay. Current conditions, solar wind speed 388.9 kilometers per second, and the density is 6.2 protons per cubic centimeter. The current sunspot number is 42. Hey, that's the answer. And let's see. Neutron count is 9.1% above the space age average, and the KP index is quiet at 1, and the 24-hour max was 3, which is the upper end of quiet. So there you go. Space weather news for this week.
Nice. And Bitcoin update. Bitcoin is currently at $30,739.99.
Hey.
And Ethereum is $1,823.37.
Buy in.
I think mine loads
that.
faster.
Yeah, thank you for pulling that up, because it takes mine forever to.
I noticed that.
To get the details there.
Okay, so I have a cool story. Moons of rogue planets could have water and life. This is from Earth Sky by Paul Scott Anderson. water is abundant in our solar system. Besides Earth, scientists have found evidence for subsurface lakes on Mars and a growing number of subsurface oceans on small icy moons in the outer solar system. It seems reasonable, then, that water might exist on planets and moons in other solar systems. But what about rogue planets, free-floating worlds that don't orbit a star? A June 2021 study from astrophysicists at Ludwig Maximilians Universität München in Germany focused on the possibility of liquid water on exomoons of rogue planets. The intriguing results show that moons of rogue planets should indeed be able to possess an atmosphere and retain liquid water.
Hey.
This is, I think there was a guy a long time ago that talked about this possibility, and maybe you can see it if you put your thumb up and block the sun out. Anyway. It might sound weird for planets to exist apart from stars, but astronomers have discovered many of these rogue planets in the past several years. Astronomers estimate there should be at least as many free-floating planets as there are stars in the Milky Way. Over 100 billion, and probably more. Now, are they saying in the entire universe or in the galaxy?
It says Milky Way, right? That's just our galaxy.
As there are stars in the Milky Way. So it's not clear, but I'm thinking it's the galaxy they're talking about.
Yeah. Because, I mean,
they drift, they're not intergalactic.
Right.
Okay. They drift freely through space, untethered by the gravity of a local star. And some of them should have moons. The paper states, a free-floating planet is a planetary mass object that orbits around a non-stellar massive object, for example, a brown dwarf, or around the galactic center.
Yeah, okay, so the rogue planets, like ones that have been pulled away.
That's what they're talking about, rogue planets, yeah.
I mean, wouldn't those just be frozen solid? Is that... Okay, all right.
The presence of exomoons orbiting free-floating planets has been theoretically predicted by several models. Artists... oh, no, that's an artist concept the picture you can't see. So, could any of these moons have water on their surfaces or inside? It would seem so, according to the new paper. The paper states, under specific conditions, these moons are able to retain an atmosphere capable of ensuring the long-term thermal stability of liquid water on their surface. We find that under specific conditions and assuming stable orbital parameters over time, liquid water can be formed on the surface of the exomoon. The final amount of water for an Earth mass exomoon is smaller than the amount of water in Earth oceans, but enough to host the potential development of primordial life. The chemical equilibrium timescale is controlled by cosmic rays, the main ionization driver in our model of the exomoon atmosphere.
Okay.
So yeah, they're because they're not in a stellar environment,
which would protect them from galactic cosmic rays.
They're getting nailed by cosmic rays, and it's heating up the exoplanet and the moon.
Wow. That's a lot of cosmic rays.
Yeah. Should I keep going?
And I suppose if it is in orbit around another body, then it could have, tectonic movement and a hot interior and volcanism and maintain, so it would have what would be called.
It's orbiting around this giant thing.
Geothermal, it's moonal thermal.
lunar thermal.
Well, it's not Luna, right?
Yeah.
It would just be a moon. I don't know. Secondary body, geothermal heat. That's cool.
Cosmic rays instead of sunlight. I wasn't going to go this far, but I want to get into the cosmic rays part. So how could a planetary system with no sun possibly support life? Plants on Earth need sunlight for photosynthesis, and almost all of their life depends on plants. In the computer model, the researchers found that cosmic rays could substitute for sunlight to convert molecular hydrogen and carbon dioxide into water and other products.
Yeah.
The tidal forces exerted by the planet on its moon could provide heat.
There you go.
Much as the giant planets in our solar system do with their icy moons. If there were enough carbon dioxide in the moon's atmosphere, at least 90%, The greenhouse effect would retain enough of that heat to keep water liquid and make life possible. I'm not sure about that. We found that an exomoon orbiting a free-floating planet, because of Boyle's law, right? And expansion and contraction and convection.
Right.
We found that an exomoon orbiting around a free-floating planet provides an environment that might sustain liquid water onto its surface if the optical thickness of the atmosphere is relatively large and the orbital parameters produce enough tidal heating to increase the temperature over the melting point of water.
Yeah.
And then the cosmic rays are coming in, providing the photosynthesis aspect of life. So I assume that the Anunnaki know all about this system.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely.
And look, maybe interstellar travel on spaceships that are man-made is impossible. But if your spaceship was a planet and a moon, then perhaps you have visited multiple worlds.
Yep.
Your interstellar ship.
Yeah. How many rogue planets are actually just giant spaceships?
I mean, if they're, we're on a spaceship right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We're just stuck we're just going around in circles, but there are spaceships out there that are interstellar and they're visiting multiple star systems.
Yeah.
Over the course of the life that might be on that moon.
Yeah.
So if you have an intelligent, advanced, technologically advanced species develop on one of these moons, and they're throughout the course of their civilization visiting multiple other worlds. I mean, they're just like, oh, well, look, we're going to do a flyby in this star system. There's some planets over there. Like there's some moons on their planets. Let's do a little, send out a probe, go check it out, and then maybe do a mission where they drop by and like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't we do that? We're doing it with comets and asteroids.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too because I don't know, I'm thinking sci-fi here, but if you needed to escape to some other part of the galaxy for whatever reason, like your particular part of the galaxy was becoming uninhabitable for some reason, like maybe the active central part of the galaxy was beginning to shoot out deadly rays towards your area, and you just happen to have a rogue planet coming by. Instead of having to build gigantic generation ships, you just move everybody to like as many people as you can to that rogue planet as it goes by, and then you just live on that planet until until
you get closer to a star,
until you get somewhere where you're like, yeah, we can live there, and we'll drop some people off there on our way.
Yeah, it's the interstellar bus system,
right? It's like you have to wait for the bus. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Emails?
Yeah. So let's see. This first one is, it's from Bro. And he says, that would be BROUGH.
What's up, bro?
Yeah. Says, hey, Snake Bros. So, I have been going through your back catalog since my last letter to you. By the way, I loved when you referenced quantum aggro with Randall, and he said, I've been contemplating being macro-aggressive. I, like you, have a passion for broadcast and long-form talk about all things science and the unknown. Every time I have tried to get in the groove of developing a show, I get stuck. For the longest time, I have chalked this up to just having a creative block, but as I listened to your Skirptard's Gonna Skirpderp episode, I had an epiphany. All of my media work has been one giant episode where I'm trying to confront Skirpderps and their Skirpderpery. Being that I am a professional medium, I witness firsthand the amazing healing and life-changing effects having a genuine spiritual experience can bring. And so, a long time ago, I felt it was my mission to crack the nutshell of Skirpderpery. And this is why I've been stuck. Every episode I have produced of my show or my podcast feature a scientist like Dean Radin or a published author like Tom Schroeder who traveled with Dr. Ian Stevenson reincarnation research. And then once my interview is over, I feature a reading between a client and myself, and it got boring after about 3 episodes, and I felt uninspired to continue. The thing I've enjoyed so much about your show is that you have such a wide variety of topics, and the dynamic between you two as loving brothers creates a character-driven dynamic. People actually tune in to hang out with you guys. The fascinating topics are just a bonus. Your broadcast work is like the best elements of Art Bell with his open mind and allure to high strangeness, and Howard Stern with his in-studio family and hilarious personality. And of course, you guys have your own unique formula, being that you have a well-adjusted family and you don't fall back on shock jockism or being negative. You are kind-hearted and thoughtful, and you avoid politics. The show is very, very good. Man.
Wow, dude.
Thank you, man.
Thanks a lot.
He says, my family was a big mess. My sisters don't respond or talk to me. And after my mother died at 25, my dad ran off with his instant girlfriend, and I haven't had a phone call or for my birthday or Christmas for years. Man. My closest family are my 2 Siamese cats, and my youngest just developed aggressive breast cancer, and she's only 9. She has months left, and I am having a very difficult time. But your podcast is one of the few things that takes my mind off the pain. My work as a sought-after medium also helps. I have a book coming out next month comprised of 5 years worth of channeling experiments with my best friend, John. John is not a psychic, but we call him a psychic technician because he has a gift with EVP and ITC with some really cool clips. An entity spoke with us for half a decade, and John recorded the sessions and then transcribed them. It's resulted in our first book, which explores the metaphysical nature of the universe, relationships, the purpose of spirit guides, and much more. But it's also a story about friendship and growth. What led me to write this long letter to you is that maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, I can recall having some profound change of perspective that would later prove life-altering. I think your episode about sculptards has led to just such a pivot in my mental focus.
Wow.
This episode helped me see how I've been banging my head against a wall of sculptards for far too long. It's as if I've been a ghost, or arguing with a ghost anyway, stuck in some loop in my creative life. I'm going to wrap this letter up, but thank you. I am going to readjust my focus, and rather than always trying to prove something, I'm just going to start focusing on having more fun and following my interests. I hope you're both well, and I also hope to try some of the wine when it's ready. Your psychic friend, B.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Yeah, dude. That's great. Just what were we saying the other day? It was trolls, right?
Yeah.
You either join them or ignore them.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. I mean, I spent a lot of my early internet life engaging with these people, and eventually you realize they are legion and they are tireless.
Yeah.
It's pointless. Just do what you enjoy, talk about it without worrying about you need to convince anybody.
Yep.
Let everybody, and what we do also is we let everybody understand, we don't know if this stuff is true, but it's fun to talk about. And also, we all know the standard story. We know it, right? So we want to talk about stuff that isn't part of the standard story, but you don't need to come in here and tell me, no, my God, this is actually the standard, because we know that. That's how I respond to him now.
That's right.
But yeah, what was the quote? Never argue with a fool. They bring you down to their level and then beat you with experience. Yeah. Right? Just freaking ignore them. Okay. This is from Eric.
And the other thing is, I think, real quick, very similar to that is the idea of the path, right? The path of the initiate. Mm-hmm. It's like you can never lead somebody down that path. They have to choose to go there themselves. So it's almost, if you follow that philosophy, it precludes ever trying to convince anybody of anything.
That's right. You become you become acutely aware of the fact that they have to go down the path themselves.
Yeah.
And when they're on the path, you can, kind of point to things and bring up interesting stuff. But if they have no interest in being on the path and they're not on it, you can't do anything about it. And nothing you say is going to change it. So.
Yep. Yeah, I learned that the hard way too. I spent a lot of time arguing with people, not on the internet, and in real life.
Yeah. And I mean, remember.
it just ends up sucking.
That's right.
It's like you leave that conversation, you're like, damn. Or you're just annoyed, or you're mad. Or,
yeah. And I remember when we first started having these conversations more than a decade ago, long before we started the podcast, we were asking each other, why is this stuff kind of secret? Why is it esoteric? And eventually you come to realize this is just how it is. People have to pursue this themselves, and it isn't necessarily that it's kept secret.
It's out there in plain sight.
Yeah.
For all to see.
Right. You just have to pursue it. Okay. From Eric, this is Tower of Babel Part 2. He says, "Hail snakes!" Was thinking about Marzulli's idea the other day, and something hit me. I did what every expert in today's modern society does. Stack assumptions. Assuming Marzulli is correct in his theory that Nephilim were indeed trying to enslave the human race and were using them to build structures, could this connect to Samaria? The Anunnaki were lying to the Sumerians, telling them they were created for the purpose of being slaves in order for the humans to do their bidding. Of course, on top of the mind-blowing knowledge they were bestowing upon us. Does this also connect to Egypt during Moses' days, where there were the Nephilim rebuilding constructions that were lost during the flood on the Giza Plateau? The story of Passover, an angel killing only Egyptian firstborn sons, has to make you wonder why. Why were they so special? Were they even human? Was Moses and the Israelites genetically chosen to be led out of Israel? Thoughts? Love you guys. Godspeed and snakes! Yeah, I don't know. When you're stacking assumptions like that, you can go anywhere, I think. But the firstborn, I can talk about this. The firstborn thing, I've kind of come to the I like the idea that what that is actually a reference to are the royal-born people of Egypt. There's some indications that was a turn of phrase, the firstborn sons of Egypt. What that meant was people who were in the royalty, in the higher bloodlines. And the reason they died is because they all lived in stone houses, which collapsed in an earthquake. Whereas people who were not part of the firstborn sons of Egypt, who were in like mud huts, earthquake comes through, it doesn't kill them because the stuff that's falling on you when you're living in a grass mud hut doesn't kill you. Whereas if you're in a stone structure, it kills you, right?
I was trying to remember that.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I just read this book that was recommended to me by a good friend. The book is called Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Oh, yeah.
So the most interesting part of this book was, talking about basically cultivation of crops and all this kind of stuff, through the rise of civilizations. But there was a part in there where he's talking about the spread of disease, and based on where certain populations come from, their societies have become immune to certain diseases because they were so prevalent. Yeah. So it already killed and weeded out the people of those societies that were susceptible to the disease. Mm. Yeah. Right. Now, that doesn't explain why it was just sons, right? But neither does the collapsing buildings.
Yeah. But no, sons of Egypt being a phrase meaning the royal blood.
The royal blood, yeah. These people who lived in this specific, they were all raised in this same style, lavish lifestyle, and then all these other people that come from the muck.
Yeah, that's right.
They've become immune to so many things or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
That was another thought.
I can see that. Yeah. All right. Let's see. This one's, I'm going to do two more here, I think. This one is, uh-oh. All right, maybe this is we get another Serapium box theory to destroy. It's called Thinking About Granite Boxes from Eric, who calls himself the Slitherator. Greetings and salutations, O scaly ones. Recently came across the Brothers of the Serpent, i.e. fell into a particularly deep rabbit hole by following the apparently traditional route via Cosmographia, and I'm now working my way through the back catalog, currently at 185, starting from episode 2, of course.
Wow.
Excellent stuff, gentlemen. As is Cosmographia, Mr. C is the man. Something that I haven't heard mentioned in any discussion so far regarding the boxes in the Serapium, how level are the boxes? Christopher Dunn's measurements regarding the precision of the box's cutting and finishing has been discussed, but that isn't quite the same as accuracy of installation.
I'm taking a level.
To achieve level rims requires a precision fit alcove floor to box bottom.
Right.
That or a lot of jimmying and shimming of the box in situ, which would likely leave visible evidence, especially if Johnson is in charge. Similarly, are the box rims and floors all at a common elevation? I have no idea of why the boxes were so precisely made, aside from a monumental case of prehistoric OCD, but I could be 97.3% wrong on that, even with the additional 30% brain expansion. But if the box creators were going to go to the trouble they obviously did, precisely leveling the boxes wouldn't be that much of an additional requirement. From the Slitherator and P.S. Snakes!
Now, see, this is not a theory.
Right. This is a good question.
This is a good question. And something that we can actually do something about.
That's right.
We can measure, whether they are level. Now, this would be the ones in the alcoves because
and we would
there
have
are
to find one with an exposed rim.
Yes,
We
which
have to do it.
most of them have the lids pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, that's
right. There's only one, I think, that still has a lid on it.
Yeah,
where
and
you
it's
can't.
just got a pole blown in the side. Yeah.
But yeah, so we can measure to see if they're level. And then the other good question is, are they all at the same, what would you call it, elevation? Like, in other words, if we took a transit in there and set it up and shot level over one box
Oh, yeah.
and say, okay, you know, the transit level is looking at exactly 3 feet over the rim of the box. Then when we go to measure the other boxes, are they all
Yeah.
the same level? Because that would indicate function.
It would.
Now, there could be tilting, sinking,
Right.
but I mean, it was cut right into the limestone, so I don't know.
Yeah. So it would have to be the limestone itself settling if there's a problem there.
Those are great questions.
And if there is shimming, it would be down in the it'd be down in the
Underneath
whole
the tile floors.
Yeah, so it'd be tough to find out. Yeah.
How are we going to get it? I'm going to have to... I could definitely bring a string level, because I can bring a little roll of string and
Yeah.
a string level, which is not the most accurate thing, but it's good. And I wouldn't have to carry like a 4 or 5 foot level in there.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Now we know some more tools to bring with us. Okay, last one here. This is from Favored Enemy. It says, let me introduce myself. It says, I wanted to drop you a line and tell you how much I enjoy the show. I was baptized into the cult while on an extended fishing trip by listening to the Giza Power Plant episodes twice while fishing Pyramid Lake in Nevada.
Yes.
Basically a whole lot of hot pyramid on pyramid action. I also had plenty of time to contemplate the Lovelock Caves, which are close by, while catching giant trout.
I like this guy, dude.
The Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe also has some of the most amazing and oldest petroglyphs in the U.S., and you should Google them if you haven't seen them. Very Olmekish. The tribe there is an amazing group of people to this day, and as legend tells, chased the last of the giants into the cave near Lovelock, Nevada, and burned the redheads to extinction. Needless to say, all of this equals a new Patreon subscription. Your episode subjects vary quite a bit, but it seems like they all lead back to a common point, as if they all lead back to one common answer. I will include some pics of another fishing spot I like to go to called Salt Springs. He needs to hang out with the stash.
Yeah, I know. They all lead back to a common answer.
Yeah.
42.
Another fishing spot I like to go to called Salt Springs near that the Skirps even admit has been occupied by people for 12,000 years. They made giant holes in the granite to evaporate salt water from a spring. The holes are up to 5 to 6 feet across and 4 feet deep, and there are hundreds of them.
What?
How many flaps does a butt flap to make a hole like that? I get they wanted salt, but why make them so huge? Very strange. The oldest ones have almost eroded away with the mountain. They've been there so long. Very cool, very spiritual place. Google Earth shows them good. Sorry to talk your ear off, but I had to get this out of my head. Remember, if all else fails, we have our ancient escape pod, the moon, if things get skirp-turpy down here. Snakes! So yeah, here's a picture of, I'm showing Kyle, his kids near one of the holes, and then there's the holes on Google Earth. There's tons of them. Yeah, it's really cool.
Did not know about
Thanks,
this.
man. Yeah, this is really awesome. And yeah, you need to hang out with the stash. You got all the fishing. All the fishing.
He throws in like, while catching giant trout.
Yeah,
That's great. I'm jealous. We got to do it. We got to do a river trip.
Yeah, we do. Yep. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back and tackle more 411 by David Paulides.
Snakes! And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Part 2 of the case study of David Paulides' 411 Eastern United States. And I was kind of left in a weird mood after the last one.
Yeah.
Real. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of, some of it's kind of tough.
Yep.
It's hard to make jokes. So
Yeah.
I try to cram them all into the first segment.
Right. There you go. And so this is the Eastern United States, Missing 411 by David Paulides. I can't recommend people buying this book enough. And so there will be links in the show notes to take you to David's website to buy the books. Don't look for them on Amazon. Those aren't they're either not the right books or they're being sold by secondhand by people for extremely high prices for whatever reason. So use the links in the show notes if you want to buy the books, and really you need to buy the books. I've marked, a few cases out of the hundreds in this book, and I'm using the book as reference and just giving you some of the details, but you really need to, if you want to tackle this subject for real, you've got to read the books themselves. So this first case that we're going to tackle today is one with a lot of details. This is the case of Trini Lynn Gibson. Went missing in 1976 in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So there's a whole section in here about the Great Smoky Mountains. And yeah, you know what? We need to pull up a calendar so I know.
Is that in Tennessee? Because Laura told me she lived near they used to go into the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, this was Knoxville.
Yeah, that's where she lived.
It was the Bearden High School in Knoxville. Took a group of students for a hike at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Yeah. So let's get a calendar up there so I can translate these numbers. It was 10/8/76. She was 16 years old at disappearance. So David says he received all the details about this case by FOIA request and through a review of various newspaper articles. And the National Park Service sent a box full of reports that outlined the search and subsequent investigation. So yes, on October 8th, 1976, Bearden High School in Knoxville took a group of students for a hike. The school was taking 40 children to hike the Appalachian Trail from Andrews Bald to Clingman's Dome. And Wayne Dunlop was the school official escorting the students. The hike would be made on the North Carolina side of the park. And Trini Gibson was part of the group of students. During the course of the trek, she bounced from group to group and hiked with different people throughout the day. At approximately 3 p.m., she was with a group that was 3/4 to 1/2 a mile from Clingman's Dome parking area, and it was at this time that something went wrong. The area where Trini was last seen has a very defined trail and is in an area where people probably would not want to leave the established route. Paulides says he personally went to the area where Trini supposedly walked off the trail, and he says he can guarantee that it is not a spot where anyone would want to leave. Maybe stepping off to look at something close by, but never stepping off to take another direction. It's too steep and rugged. Nothing is on the other side of the trail except miles and miles of rough forest without defined trails, and it's hazardous. And there's a picture in the book of the area. NPS conducted interviews of students who were with Trini when she vanished. So here's a summary of each person's interview and the account of what happened per the National Park Service's file. The first part of the file says weather at this time was strong winds and heavy rain with temperatures in the low 30s on the night after she disappeared. So the National Park Service determined that a full-scale search would start next morning at 7 a.m., but the weather was too detrimental to continue the search at this point. So a summary of witness statements described Trini as studious, athletic, sarcastic, but not the type to panic. And they didn't think she was the runaway type. Miss Coghill was 200 feet from Trini when she made the following observation. Witness, Miss Coghill, states that Trini bent over on the trail as if looking at something near a flat rock and then disappeared to the right of the trail. Witness Robert Simpson was overheard to say that he had stayed behind the group to track a bear when Trini went towards the parking area with the group. At 2015 hours, interview with Anita Bounds, who was with Trini when she was last seen. The main group in which Anita was a part stopped to rest, and Trini continued on. She was on the trail when I last saw her. I looked away, and when I looked back, Trini was nowhere in sight. I should have been able to see her if she went up the trail. I checked the area where she was last seen. No trail leading off. Very rough. Small stream. Brush and trees. I yelled, but there was no answer. A phone interview with Bobby Coghill, who was with the group,
She was up the trail, and it looked like Trini stopped and bent over, and then she made a right turn off the trail. I checked the spot where she was last seen. I do not believe she could have went off the trail at that point. Too rough, rocks, bushes, and trees. So multiple people saw her apparently look at something interesting on the ground and then walk right off the trail and into the woods. Commander John Maddox of the Swain County Civil Air Patrol called search headquarters to complain. He had 40 men, 2 doctors, 14 pilots, and 5 planes all standing by to assist with the search. But due to lack of cooperation from the Park Service, he took all those people off the search. They were getting no coordination. So, yeah, a large contingent of searchers was available to respond and assist, but the MPS somehow ignored them. Then on 10/13, the FBI officially enters the investigation. The Knoxville Division states they are looking only for violations of federal law, and they have found no evidence of a crime so far, but the FBI sent 2 agents to monitor the case. The official search for Trini Gibson continued from October 8th through the 22nd. Ranger John Lenahan wrote this in his report. Trails and drainages were walked as far out as Elkmont in Tennessee, a distance of 15 miles, and Fontana Lake in North Carolina, a distance of 13 to 14 miles. 300 people participated in the search, including trackers, dogs, rescue squads, helicopters, airplanes, 2 additional Army helicopters, deputies, bloodhounds, and German shepherds. On April 7th in 1977, so that would be, that's the next year? Yes. Trini's father, Robert Gibson, requested the NPS assistance for another extensive search of the location. The community was still quite interested in understanding what had happened, and hundreds of searchers would have responded, but Park Superintendent Bob Gibson, so this is weird, it's got the same last name, the superintendent and the family. I don't know why, it just seems strange. So he has the same name as her father. Huh. Robert Gibson, unless this is a typo in the book. Trini's father's name was Robert Gibson. It says the park superintendent is Bob Gibson. Bob is short for Robert, right? Yeah. Anyway, the park superintendent said he would only allow 25 searchers because he wanted to avoid, quote, backcountry use and, again, to minimize any chance of circus atmosphere, unquote. In other words, they don't want people hiking off trail.
Is this one of the, because I remember in some of his interviews, David talking about how the Park Service would hide stuff from him, and it seemed like in some cases they were very well aware something was going on, and they were not wanting to.
Or in this case, this guy seems to hold the wilderness in higher regard than finding this missing girl. You know, because they are concerned. They don't want people tramping around off trail, damaging fragile sticks.
Okay.
Yeah. Paulides says, I can only guess that Bob Gibson felt that damage to the backcountry was more important than finding a missing girl. So case summary. Trini disappeared within sight of a group of fellow students. Multiple students confirmed that she left the trail approximately 1/2 mile from Klingman's Dome parking lot. Witnesses saw her leave at this point, but they couldn't believe she could leave at that location. Another witness states that she was looking down at something at the same location and left the trail near a small creek bed. Prior to Trini disappearing, Robert Simpson is overheard saying he was tracking a bear in the area. But understand, a bear did not take her. There would be screams, blood, and a scene at the point where she left the trail. But I do find it interesting that Robert Simpson claims to have been tracking a bear at the approximate time she vanishes.
This is another Robert?
I think that might have been
Robert Simpson.
Yeah, Robert Simpson. So another Bob. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Robert Simpson, another student. So Paulides says he believes the key to Trini's disappearance is what she was looking at just off trail before she disappeared. Either someone or something pulled her off the trail, or she voluntarily left the trail to investigate. It's also quite coincidental that heavy rains hit the area of Trini's disappearance in the same manner that they hit the region of Dennis Martin's disappearance. So similarities between Trini's and Dennis's disappearance, they both disappear within view of friends and family. No trace of either person was ever found. No clothes, no body, nothing. Both disappeared in close proximity to the Tennessee-South Carolina state line that divides the park. Heavy rains hit the exact area of disappearance the night that each went missing. The incidents occurred in an area where there were many other people. And NPS and FBI refused to admit abduction had taken place, and the FBI refuses to release files on either case. So, yeah, she's never been found, not even a trace.
So has there been like a FOIA request for these documents?
Yes, multiple times he tries to request the FBI documents, and they don't give them up. But he's able to get some of the documents from the NPS with using FOIA. That was the case with this one. He said details regarding the disappearance of Trini were obtained through a FOIA request and through review of numerous newspaper articles. But he did the FOIA request to the NPS. And he says the NPS sent him a box full of reports that outlined the search.
Wow.
But he can't. But every time he FOIAs the FBI, when he finds out the FBI gets involved, then he FOIAs them, and they've never sent him. According to David, they've never sent him the files of any of the cases. All right. This is the case of Minnie Hahn, missing October 8th, 1957 at 1 p.m., Wells Springs in Tennessee. Age at disappearance, 3 years old. So Mr. and Mrs. Frank Hahn lived in a very rural area, 10 miles east of Lafayette. On October 8th, 1957 at approximately 1 p.m., Mrs. Hahn took Minnie and her sisters on a walnut collecting expedition in the area behind their home. She left Minnie briefly with her 4-year-old sister. Minnie was given instructions to wait at the location until they came back. Several minutes after leaving the girls alone, she returned and found Minnie was gone. Mrs. Hahn asked the 4-year-old where Minnie went, and the girl stated that she had decided to walk towards the home. Mrs. Hahn searched the area, couldn't find her daughter, and called the sheriff. Within hours, there were dozens of sheriff's deputies, state police, neighbors, and friends all searching for the 3-year-old. In the first 24 hours that Minnie was gone, the search party swelled to over 2,000 people scouring the hillsides.
Wow.
Shortly into the second day of the search, the sheriff called the FBI. Mr. and Mrs. Hahn could not believe that Minnie had disappeared so quickly and told reporters this, explaining their astonishment. Those first few nights, temperatures dropped into the 40s. Searchers asked for assistance from the Air Force radar station, and 60 men responded. Search and rescue teams had the mountains covered with people looking and yelling for the young girl. After 52 hours of searching, the sheriff called off searchers, an astounding decision after so short a period of time. 6 days after Minnie went missing, volunteer searchers continued and were over 6 miles from the Hahn residence when they started to find pieces of Minnie's clothing. They found one shoe containing a sock. A short distance from an old sawmill, they found her cap. The team climbed to the top of a ridgeline and through, quote, 1.5 miles of rough underbrush and wooded mountain land from the sawmill where her tracks were located, they found her body. Some reports indicated that Minnie was located at the base of a cliff, but this was not true. She was found on a ridgeline, without shoes, without her hat, and wearing only a very light dress. Coroner indicated that she had been dead for 3 to 4 days. The searchers, led by Campbell County Sheriff Willie Chapman, said the child had climbed to the top of one of the many cliffs that dot the Cumberlands in this area. So this is Cumberland area. So FBI agents were on this case when the body was found, and one article indicated they closed the case once Minnie was found. I did file a FOIA with the FBI regarding this case, says Paulides. On September 28, 2011, Paulides received a letter from the section chief of the FBI, David M. Hardy. He stated, records which may be responsive to your FOIA request were destroyed on February 1st, 1999. Since this material could not be reviewed, it is not known if it was responsive to your request.
What? When did he so I can't remember the dates. When did he ask?
He filed the FOIA in 2011.
Okay, so
they're saying that the records were destroyed in 1999. Yeah.
And then when did she go missing?
In 57.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, you
Yeah.
know, if they're destroying record, like, why wouldn't they just digitize them? I don't know. 1999 is not too late to digitize the dang records.
Yeah.
Maybe they just figure it's an old case. She was found, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
So yes, Mr. and Mrs. Hahn expressed
But they kept records of the destruction of the records.
Right. Yeah. So this is another of many cases cited in both books in which the FBI is concerned enough to be on scene for a very unusual case. FBI Special Agent Jim Reich is the individual whom the FBI sent to all the cases in the Smoky Mountains where children disappeared. Paulides says he thinks Reich had a very good grasp of the complexity of the issue, but the FBI won't release the documents.
So it was like one guy assigned to the whole area. Wow.
That's right.
Oh, man, I would hate to be that guy.
Understand that the FBI is a very conservative, intelligent, and methodical group that does not send special agents to missing persons cases unless there is the possibility of criminal activity. The only criminal activity relevant to missing persons in the woods is abduction. Okay. Skipping quite a bit here. Now we're... the next case is Michael Eugene Reel. Missing July 2nd, 1983, 9:30 in the morning, Roan Mountain State Park in Tennessee.
I'm sorry.
What?
That's
fine.
I didn't realize you were about to go into another case. And I'm thinking, okay, again, this was a 4-year-old?
3 years old.
3-year-old.
Yep.
And it was 6 miles away.
Up on a ridge line.
Up on a ridge, and had been dead for 4 days when she had been missing for 6.
Right.
So 2 days, 6 miles, up on a ridge, 3 years old.
That's right. That's a great summary there.
Okay. Through like they described the brush they had to get through to get up on the ridge. Why did they even go up on the ridge?
Right. Why were they so far out? I guess.
I mean, they had thousands of people looking in the area, so they just knew, like, well, we got to go further away.
Well, let's see. The sheriff called off the search after 52 hours.
Yeah.
Which is just a little over 2 days. So 6 days later, there were volunteer searchers continuing searching. In other words, it was no longer being coordinated by the sheriff. They were just still looking.
Yeah, for 6 days they've been looking.
Yeah.
So they were 6 days later after they searched for 2.5 days.
No, 6 days after she went missing.
Okay.
So 4 days after the search was shut down, the official search was shut down, there were still volunteers plus her parents.
So the sheriff shuts down the search basically right when she died.
Yeah, that is weird.
Okay.
Maybe that's a coincidence. I don't know. That's a little strange. And then, yeah, so they said they found a shoe containing a sock. That's the first thing they found way out there, 6 miles away.
So that's like, yeah, that's not like you dropped your shoe. That's deliberate.
Right. And it isn't paradoxical undressing either, because paradoxical undressing is like you start taking off your shirt
And it was in the 40s in the first night.
Right.
And so she lived for 2 days.
Right. Yeah.
So she didn't die of hypothermia in the first night. Or whatever.
Right. Then which I guess they found an old sawmill, and then they found her hat. So they find one shoe and a sock. Then they find a hat. Then they climbed the top of a ridgeline and through, quote, 1.5 miles of rough underbrush and wooded mountain land from the sawmill, where her tracks were located. They find the body. So she's on the ridgeline. She doesn't have any shoes on. She doesn't have her hat. And she's missing other clothing. They say that she was found wearing only a very light dress. So she was missing a coat, I guess, and some other things. Mm-hmm. So where did those items of clothing go? Yeah. Where was her other shoe? You know, it's strange.
That's weird.
Okay. So Michael Eugene Reel, missing July 2nd, 1983 at 9:30 a.m., Roan Mountain State Park in Tennessee, 8 years old at the age of disappearance. Okay, so Michael was at a campsite with his mother and a sister. He told his mother that he was going to retrieve water for this campsite, took a bucket, started to walk up the road. And that was the last time his mother saw him for 7 days. Once Michael didn't immediately return, the mother started to search and then called law enforcement. On the day after he disappeared, the weather turns to rain, which hampers search efforts. Law enforcement was frustrated by the lack of any viable clues. On July 5th, 1983, let's see, that would be 3 days later, Michael's mother made a statement to the press about the disappearance. The boy's mother said she feared he had been kidnapped. Later in the same article was the following. Carter County Sheriff Bill Crumley said there was no reason to suspect foul play, but Bob Carey, the district ranger for Pisgah National Forest, said, I've been on a lot of searches and things seem a little fishy. So that was the district ranger for the National Forest. He's like, something's not right here. The search continued to not produce results, and it was at this point that 30 paratroopers from Fort Bragg came into the park aboard 4 Army helicopters. They scoured the park in a very defined way. An article in the July 8th, 1983 edition of the Star News said that Michael's father told the press that he felt his son had been abducted. Temperatures in the park at night were now in the low 20s.
Oh, my God.
And our Army could still not find Michael. 140 Green Beret troops arrive at the park and divide into 2-man teams. They search specific areas of the park, use their special skills and night vision equipment. Bloodhounds and canines were brought. Nothing seemed to be working. The Green Berets knew these mountains well. They spent 2 weeks searching 20 miles south of this area for Dennis Martin.
Oh, my gosh.
On July 10th, 1983, the Hutchinson News had a story indicating that Michael had been found exactly 1 week to the day and hour from when he disappeared. The article stated, Bailey said that rescuers found the child 2.5 miles from the campsite where he disappeared last Saturday. Taylor Bailey, one of the men who found the boy, said Michael indicated he spent so he was alive.
Yeah.
Michael,
otherwise, they say they found the body.
Right. Michael indicated he spent part of the week in a deserted cabin that was not searched by the Army trackers or Green Beret or hundreds of others. But Park Superintendent Glenn Hatfield said he found it hard to believe that any cabin was missed in the exhaustive week-long hunt. Rescuers stated that they had found the boy in an area searched many times before, and he was in a blackberry thicket. Other articles stated that Michael described events to... Remember, he's 8 years old, right?
Yep, he's 8.
So he's, Okay, so other articles stated that Michael described events to rescuers that seemed incredible. Quote, rescue squad members said the boy talked of having spent time watching television with his grandfather, but they believed he had hallucinated. Doctors said he was alert and oriented by the time he reached the hospital, but because of the boy's confusion, authorities hadn't been able to learn how he spent the past 7 to 8 days.
In 20-degree weather.
Right.
At night.
In later interviews with Michael's mother, she said she found the stories amazing, the ones that Michael was telling, especially since he had no recollection of ever meeting either grandfather. Both of them are deceased.
Oh, my God.
Michael's mother did say that Michael explained to her that he had spent time on the mountain with someone on Friday night, but he was unable or refused to say who or what. On July 11th, 1983, the Tuscaloosa News ran a story with the following regarding Michael's story. Quote, the boy also said he had seen his mother Thursday near the campsite and called to her so he wouldn't get lost again. Michael said he had seen an old man getting drunk on Budweiser beer and a gallon of bourbon. He said he didn't seek the man's help because he doesn't talk to strangers. Michael also said he'd eaten bacon and eggs with his grandfather Saturday morning. But a relative said both his grandfathers are dead and the boy remembers neither of them. Unquote. So Paulides says several of the articles he reviewed for this story indicated that when Michael was found, he was well kept, his hair was combed and clean, his clothes were dirty and torn, and he did have many scratches around the ankles. Doctors who examined Michael were amazed at his condition, given the number of days he was missing. So case summary. Yeah, this is strange, and I found that the bit about the grandfather. You know what that reminded me of? Remember when we had Marty on here, and you and I talked about? Yes, we talked about the witness to another world.
Yes, that's exactly.
He
what
has
I
the
thought
encounter with the UFO, and he hangs out with his grandfather.
Granddad. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And how old was he? He was like 10 or 12 or something like that.
Exactly. Right in the range here. This kid was 8. Michael was 8.
Yeah. But yeah, this is it's got to be abduction. I mean, there's no.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense otherwise. I mean, I guess he could have just hallucinated.
Yeah.
But how? I mean,
But he was fed.
even in a cabin.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't remember. Like, if I was able to do this at 8 years old, but like go into a cabin, start a fire, you know, whatever, keep warm or something. You like.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because I mean, in a cabin with 20-degree weather outside with no heating,
It's cold.
It's cold in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Paulides reminds us that a forest ranger did make a statement about the incident being fishy. It seems highly unusual that Michael was gone over 7 days in temperatures that got quite cold at night, and it did rain, and yet he was found in a fairly neat and clean state. Some of the doctors and searchers claimed that Michael was hallucinating about meals with his relatives and seeing family members. He made statements that he had eaten fruit, berries, etc., and then later made a statement about having a full breakfast, bacon and eggs with Granddad. Yeah, so Paulides says he believes the family was extremely fortunate to get Michael back alive. The huge response from the military and locals may have been the catalyst for healthy recovery of the boy. Okay. It's just that's one of the that's a strange case to me. I mean, they're all strange, but that one, the Granddad part really stood out to me. Okay, now we're going to Ohio.
Just so you could, I mean, if you try to put in a normal abduction and say like there's just this old, you know, Granddad character who somehow tricks him into like, yeah, I'm your granddad,
right?
You know?
Yeah, I'm gonna have some bacon and eggs.
Yeah, like, I mean, how would that person keep him hidden from, like, during this vast search? I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. It seems like somebody would know about the guy, you know, that he would be questioned.
And if there's a cabin in the, you know, so Michael was found at a place that had been searched multiple times.
Yeah.
He claims he stayed in a cabin that no one came to. If somebody cooked bacon and eggs out in the woods, all the dogs would smell that. Yeah. Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so going to Ohio here, the first one is Carolyn Peterson.
I'm just going to say UFOs, but
Missing August 20th, 1947 at 11 a.m. Age at disappearance, 20 months. So not even 2 years old. The location of the Peter residence is 10 miles south of Marion and adjacent to the Delaware Wilderness Area and Delaware Lake. It's a rural location, very few homes or cars. On August 20th, 1947, Carolyn was placed in her yard by her mother and told she could play. A short time after she was placed in the yard, Mrs. Peterson went out to check but couldn't find the girl. A search was made of the surrounding farm area, but the girl could not be located. The Petersons contacted law enforcement and neighbors who soon arrived and started a formal search. Marion County Sheriff's Office was the law enforcement agency leading the search. And Sheriff Leroy Retterer was the person leading the effort. Soon after the girl disappeared, the area was inundated with 2 severe thunderstorms that dropped several inches of rain. Searchers were temporarily impeded in their efforts, but did complete dragging of, Quaqua Creek. Quua Creek. Quaqua. They mowed the fields, they probed old wells, all without finding the girl. At the height of the search, the sheriff stated that over 1,000 people were helping. After 48 hours, the sheriff terminated the search, claiming he felt the girl had been kidnapped. He did not believe she could be in the area due to the extensive searching and her inability to move long distances because of her age. An artigraph in the Telegraph Herald had the following. Her father, Charles Peterson, and Sheriff Leroy Retterer believed that the tot was kidnapped, possibly by a childless couple who were attracted by her beauty. Unquote. On Saturday, August 23rd, so that would be the 3 days after she disappeared, a local farmer, Samuel Almendinger, what a great name, who was 75, was walking a perimeter path of his farm and heard a faint voice in a briar patch. He couldn't believe someone would be in there, but he struggled his way through the thickets and finds Carolyn Peterson alive. The girl had blackberry stains on her hands, but when found, she was sitting on the ground with her hands through a wire fence, and it appeared she had been playing. He picks the girl up, takes her back to the Peterson farm. She was taken to a hospital for examination, had dozens of small scratches, remarkably good condition. Doctors could not explain how she had been missing for over 4 days and hadn't suffered sunburn. So there you go. And once again, the berries. Like, she's not even 2 years old. I don't know.
Yeah.
And something sticks her in this briar patch, and he's got to force his way in there, It's almost like she was put there to be found by this guy who was just happened to be, he happens to be walking the perimeter of his farm.
I'm gonna assume that the authorities, somehow questioned this guy and got or maybe he was friends with maybe he knew.
I guess the first thing you would think is he the one who took her?
Yeah, sure, buddy.
You're right.
Oh, I just found her in her briar patch.
Right. Yeah, of course. So you either have to assume that was ruled out or wonder if that's just the case, that he was the one who took her for whatever reason. Yeah, 75-year-old man decides he wants a 20-month-old little girl.
Yeah. I would assume that they ruled that out.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was...
They already started talking about abduction, so somebody brings her back, you have to assume that they might look into it. And I guess, if that happened to me, if some child goes missing and people are starting to think they're being abducted, and then I find the kid on my land, I'm going to bring them back, and I know that they're going to wonder if I was the one that took them.
Exactly.
So I would be prepared for that, right?
Yeah.
Did you bring? Yeah. Okay. So this is Pennsylvania. It's Pennsylvania region, but this actually happened in New York, and this is a really old case. It's May 9th, 1888. In New York. Age at disappearance, 30 months. So just over 2 years this time. So there is only one article about the disappearance of... Is this the right person? Yeah, Millard Davis's daughter. So he points out in several times in the book when in a lot of these old cases, the articles and newspapers don't put the name of the child in the stories. It was they just didn't name the child. So they would say the daughter of so-and-so. So all you know is their last name. So he says the child was unknown first name, but last name is Davis. And the father was Millard Davis. Millard's daughter disappeared, and a search went through the night looking for the girl. The day after she disappeared, a trout fisherman 2 miles from the family's residence was in a deep ravine and spotted the girl standing in the middle of the brook where he was fishing for trout. The fisherman takes the girl to the parents, and she was questioned. So this is a quote. "The little girl was never known to tell stories and in fact is too young and innocent to practice deceit. When her father asked her where she had slept all night, the little one answered, 'In the woods with a big bear, Papa.'"
Oh my gosh. It's crazy.
She was closely questioned, but the child adhered to her story that she had slept with a bear in the woods. And people in Boyceville, which is the name of the little town, believed that the little girl really did meet a bear, and not knowing what it was, went up to it, and for some reason the bear refrained from hurting her. So Paulides says this story is very similar to other stories in this book of children claiming to be abducted by a bear. Sometimes they sleep with the bear. Sometimes they are just carried away. In all of the instances that are cited, the victim is never seriously injured. So yeah, Paulides just says, I believe the children believe what they are saying. I just question if it was really a bear.
Yeah.
So that statement is one of the ones where you can kind of understand where people read this and think he thinks it's Sasquatch. Yeah. So Paulides says he placed the Davis incident in the Pennsylvania section because it occurred just 30 miles east of the eastern border of the state, and it matches other cases that occurred in the Pennsylvania chapter. So readers take note of where she was found, standing in the middle of a creek, a location where no tracks or footprints can be seen. So something drops her there, and walks off and doesn't leave a trail or a scent track of itself, right? It's like, very interesting.
I wonder if the dogs can pick up.
I was sleeping with a bear, Papa.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if the dogs can pick up the scent flowing in the water, right? Like if something is walking in the creek upstream, like a deer.
Yeah.
The deer feet, they have their little, I don't know what, there's little patches down there with the strong scent on them.
Yeah.
If they're walking in a creek, it seems like downstream
A dog
would be able to pick it up. Like
Yeah.
this is flowing in the water.
Yeah. I don't know.
But
That's why we need to get an expert on to talk about
if you're
this.
upstream,
Yeah.
the scent is moving down,
Right.
away from you. So I don't know.
Yeah. And the longer time passes, the farther downstream that scent trail goes, and
Yeah,
it's gone.
But
right.
yeah, but that would give you an indication. It was like, the dog's like, oh yeah, 2 miles up there's a deer walking in the creek.
Yeah, right. There you go. All right, it's time for a break, and we'll come back with more cases from Missing 411, Eastern United States. And we are back, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, second hour. And just a reminder, almost all of the music you hear on this show is made in-house by Kyle. I'm the one that tells him which ones are cool, but he does make all the music. And yeah, what did you say? This is a new one. This one?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Kind of still raw.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, people have asked multiple times, like, where do I find this music online? It's our music, and it's not online except for on the podcast for the most part.
I think I remember what the premise was. I was using, I think it's 432.
Oh,
Zero,
okay. You're
right?
using the golden. Oh no, you're using the
4320.
yeah 4320 processional number.
in the piano part. Let's see, is it just the piano part? Maybe there's just a piano part. But yeah, I was trying some various things of like combining these different numbers together with like different melodies, and they're weird. The timings are strange.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I think that
And
one has 432.
We took an extended
4320.
We took an extended mid-show break to get some coffee.
Yes. Nice. I needed to stretch my legs. I've been in the studio all day.
Yeah.
Edited the Cosmos show this morning. Spent a lot of time in here last night.
That's right. So we are going through cases, select cases of for the most part, strange disappearances of children who are found alive in the Missing 411 Eastern United States book by David Paulides. Check the show notes. You guys really need to get this book. I can't stress this enough. There are hundreds of cases in here. We're only going through a few, and I'm definitely not reading even all the details from each individual case. So if you want to get more info on this and really dive into this topic, I recommend going to David's website, which there are links for this in the show notes to get the books. Don't buy it from Amazon.
I really wish there was an audio version of this book.
I know.
Or all of the whole series, but
Yeah.
you
Maybe we can reach out to him.
Yeah, you could
Like,
do
hey,
the audio version.
I could do the audio version for sure.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So we're still in the Pennsylvania region. This is a 2-year-old Geraldine Markline missing. Where's my calendar? November? No. October? October. Missing October 26, 1929.
They get the Roman or what are those? Yeah, I guess they're Roman numbers, right? Octo, novem.
Oh.
They should
Yeah.
get them right. They just need to rearrange it because that should be the 8th month.
Octo, yeah.
Sept is the 7th. I mean, it's just all messed up.
Yeah, so this was 3.5 miles northeast of Hanover in Pennsylvania. So Paulides says Hanover is located approximately 15 miles southwest of York and is in this
Latin.
southeastern important portion of Pennsylvania.
It's surrounded by several large and small bodies of water with significant open space. The mountains rise from a valley floor at an elevation of 600 feet to the summit of 1,200 feet. The hills are covered with lush vegetation and are surrounded by farms. The Markline Farm was located approximately halfway between Hanover and the Pigeon Hills, 20 miles north of the Maryland border. On October 26, 1929, Mrs. Markline needed to travel to Hanover on business and decided to put her oldest boy in charge of the children while she was gone. After she left, the oldest boy, whose name was Luther, took the children into the backyard and they started to collect leaves for the barn. He put Geraldine in a sitting position in the backyard at the bottom of a large tree and told her to stay put while he ran into the house to get food. After a very short time, he returns and she was missing. The children and Luther searched for the sister but could not find her. When Mrs. Markline returned from her excursion, Luther told her Geraldine was missing and she contacts authorities. Dozens of searchers scoured the wooded trails before it became dark on October 26th. Many searchers were yelling for Geraldine but couldn't find any evidence of her whereabouts. They quickly became very concerned because the Markline farm was in a very rural area and near the heavy woods of the Pigeon Mountains. They started the second day with the assistance of Hanover police and were baffled by where a 2-year-old girl could go without being detected. On October 28th, that would be 2 days after the disappearance, the Pittsburgh Post ran the following article, quote, "While some feared that an abandoned Waterfield quarry near her home held her body, and her father thinks the child kidnapped, thousands of persons last night scoured the Pigeon Hills in hope of finding a trace of Geraldine Markline, age 2, missing since Saturday," unquote. So Paulides says, imagine thousands of searchers scouring a very confined area for a missing 2-year-old child. A child who can't run, can barely walk, and the searchers are finding nothing. On October 28th, searchers were working the area in the Pigeon Mountains and up elevation, and they found her. She was missing her coat, hat, one set of leggings, and one shoe. None of those clothes were found. She had numerous scratches over her body, but was in very good condition. She was unable to explain what happened or where she had been during the search. So there you go. Not many details on that one, but still, it's just another one of these cases where missing for multiple days, they find the child missing, lots of clothing in strange ways, just, one shoe.
Yeah, that's not so weird with a 2-year-old, I don't think, because they just, they're able to take clothes off, sort of.
Uh-huh.
And they lose shoes very easily because their feet don't really hold shoes, the way they're just designed.
She's also missing her coat and hat and one of her leggings.
Yeah.
So she's tromping through the woods and just shedding stuff randomly.
Yeah.
Things get caught on stuff and she just takes it off and leaves it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's more strange about that is just how long, she's on her own.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
So the last thing Paulides says in this case here is he says, there are other disappearances of people in close proximity. Geraldine's disappearance was really the modern day start to disappearances of children and young adults in Pennsylvania that continued from 1929 until 1957 and then inexplicably stop.
That is weird. This is part of the larger clusters. Yeah.
They're time-based and proximity-based. So you see like a cluster within 15 years, a large number of disappearances of people of a certain age and sometimes a certain appearance. And in a lot of cases in here, he's telling you all these kids have blonde hair or something, right? And and there's all these strange disappearances with similar patterns, and then it just stops happening for 20 or 30 years, and then it picks up again. Starts happening again,
That's just weird.
Yeah. Okay.
Like whatever it is like hibernating.
Or moving. Sometimes it looks like it shifts to another area because then another cluster starts up somewhere else.
When
right?
one stops, yeah.
Yeah. It starts up at the other end of this vast wilderness tract in a different state.
That's weird.
That was part of what Spriggs was pointing out
I know.
when we had Thomas Spriggs on. Okay. Still in Pennsylvania, this case takes place in Ohio, but it's right on the edge of the state. So it's Pennsylvania region. This is Rita Margaret Lent. Went missing November 22nd, 1934 at noon, North Richmond Township in Ohio. Age of disappearance, 3 years. Blonde hair. So yeah, he says this case is from Ohio, but it happened less than 5 miles from the Pennsylvania border, so it's included in the Pennsylvania cluster. On November 22nd, Rita was playing in her yard in a rural area north of northern Richmond Township. This area is spotted with small and large farms and wet and marshy areas. It was lunchtime. Rita's mother looks out the window of her home and sees Rita playing with her German Shepherd police dog, whose name was Buddy. The mother checks again 15 minutes later and didn't see Rita or the dog and goes to search. Mrs. Olivia walked out to her farm and could not locate Rita. She calls the child's name several times, doesn't get a response, immediately summons neighbors and law enforcement. Within hours, dozens of searchers are combing the grounds of the farm and the surrounding areas.
What about the dog? No mention of the dog, huh?
Not yet. The dog is still missing with the child. The father, they were legally separated. The father lived outside of Richmond in Connaught, but spent considerable time around the farm looking. 7 days of searching did not produce one lead in Rita's disappearance. At this point, Olivia states she felt her daughter had been kidnapped. During the search, a very odd occurrence did take place. The dog returns. It had rained the night that Rita disappeared. Buddy returns home late that night, but he was completely dry. Something that promoted the idea that a kidnapping may have occurred. Like they kidnapped the dog with the kid.
That's weird.
And then they eventually let the dog go. During the initial investigation, police were convinced that something unusual happened. They did call the mother and her ranch hand into the police station and question them for hours. It was obvious that the police felt that Olivia knew more than what she was saying, and they were trying a tactic to get her to say something incriminating. The only thing Olivia said was that the police held her for an unreasonable amount of time, they wouldn't let her leave, and she fell asleep exhausted while being questioned. Nothing happened on the Rita Lent disappearance for almost 3 months. February 16, 1935, a farmhand 2 miles from the Lent farm was walking through a cow pasture and saw something bulky on the ground in a large mud puddle. He walked into the puddle and found the body of Rita Lent. It was moderately decomposed and missing a shoe, but it was her. It was 300 feet from a barn in a very muddy area near the edge of a ditch. The finding of the body caused even more concerns in law enforcement. The farmer and the ranch hand that found the body made statements indicating the body may have been there for months, but they doubted it. It was in an area where they would normally pass, and they didn't think they had seen a body there before. A February 18th article in the San Antonio Express stated the following, quote, Coroner Watson says he does not believe the child's body had lain in the mud hole in which it was discovered since last November. Its good state of preservation indicates it had been in a cool place, either a cellar or a basement, and only recently placed in the mud hole where it was discovered. There are several unusual or several mysterious circumstances surrounding this case, stated Sheriff Benson, unquote. The article doesn't list the other possibility of where the body may have been located, which would be a cave. A February 16th, 1935 article in the St. Joseph Press stated, quote, Deputy Sheriff R.M. Blanca, who led the search, said he believed Rita had been kidnapped, unquote. A February 16th article in the St. Petersburg Times stated the following, quote, The mother was brought to Jefferson for questioning. She alternately wept and discussed the case in an analytical manner. The child was kidnapped, she stated. There is no doubt that Rita was kidnapped and placed there. How could the little thing have walked that far? She would have had to have walked 4 miles and crossed a creek to get to the place where she was found, unquote. The final death report indicated that Rita's body did not show any inflicted violence, and it was felt she died of natural causes. So if it is an abduction, it's not a murder in the sense of trauma or whatever. Like, you abduct a child and then you just let it go into the wilderness until it dies of exposure or starvation. I don't know. It's strange. No poisons were found in her body either. All internal organs were analyzed for poisons. And they kept the mother in custody while the testing was completed.
Jeez. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Ronald Rumbaugh, missing September 15th, 1940 at 2 p.m. Scottsdale Dawson Road in Scottdale, Pennsylvania. 2 years old. So the first thing that Paulides is pointing out in this is that there's a window frame around the region in terms of disappearances. This disappearance occurred within a 10-mile radius of 3 others. The first one in this window was 60 years before this case, but the 2 disappearances occurred within 2 miles of each other. Considering that Pennsylvania has 44,816 square miles and the state's dimensions are approximately 280 miles wide by 160 miles long, the statistical odds of 2 children disappearing in essentially the same place is mind-boggling, he says. So Ronald was outside his rural home located on the road between Scottdale and Dawson. On September 15th in 1940, Rumbaugh's father went to a nearby baseball game and left his 5 children in the yard. It is theorized that Ronald may have tried to follow his father and became lost. The father returned from the event after a short period of time, and when he couldn't find Ronald, he called the Pennsylvania State Police. The area where Ronald disappeared is a region that was starting to become a hub for child disappearances in the ensuing 13 years. State police officers responding to the incident did the normal search and rescue functions that were commonplace in 1940. They had equestrians, hikers, police officers, sheriffs, and state police officers combing the area. Cornfields searched. Jacobs Creek was swept. Near the 3rd day, the police gathered hundreds of volunteers, and they searched the fields row by row to ensure they didn't miss the young lad. In total, 1,700 people searched for Ronald Rumbaugh for the 3 days, and they didn't find one trace of him. State police officials stated publicly they didn't feel that a 2-year-old could survive in the elements for 3 days, and they were going to terminate the search. And just as they were doing that, a local pilot and volunteer were flying, a local pilot and volunteer and a spotter were flying over a cornfield 3 miles from the Rumbaugh residence. When they flew over the center of the corn, they spotted a boy lying on stalks, and he was not moving. After a second flyover at a lower altitude, the boy started to move and sit up. So he lowers the plane, does a slow fly over the Rumbaugh property, and they yelled at the family below where the boy was located. So they're like shouting out the window of the plane. In a scene reminiscent of an Alfred Hitchcock movie, the Rumbaughs and state police officers raced to the cornfield, ran through hundreds of rows, and found Ronald alive and groggy. He was transported to Connesville General Hospital, where he was found to have various scratches and bruises, but generally in excellent health. Headlines in the Evening Independent newspaper said, "Lost baby found. Officers still believe he was kidnapped." The cornfield where the boy was located was searched row by row the day before. They did not believe there was any way they could have missed him. The same article stated, quote, "The boy showed no ill effects expected if he had wandered through woods and fields coatless since vanishing from his home Sunday afternoon. The police officer said the boy's light jumper suit was not soiled much or torn, and a new pair of white shoes he wore for the first time on Sunday did not show the wear and tear of an outdoor tromp." The sergeant said he believed that someone had snatched the child and then, frightened by the hue and cry aroused, had left him in a safe place in the cornfield where he would be found, unquote. So that's a pattern. Like, it seems like the police and the parents all start thinking abduction, and then the child is found in a place where that was searched multiple times, and they think he was abducted, and whoever did this got freaked out by how many people came out to start searching, and then leave the kid in a place where they think it'll be found so that the search will stop.
Yeah, with no fear that the child could possibly give details that would indicate who it was.
Right.
And they never do.
Yeah. Well, and this was a 2-year-old, so there's...
But still, I mean,
yeah.
you could maybe get a description from it.
Yeah.
He or she.
The local police stationed an officer at Ronald's room for the 2 days he was hospitalized. The officer reported that he tried to question the boy several times, but it was nearly impossible to get a coherent answer. Mr. and Mrs. Rumbaugh were questioned about the kidnapping, and they agreed that someone grabbed Ronald and sheltered him during the days he was missing. In a Gettysburg Times interview, the boy's father stated that his son, quote, could not have walked that far and stayed almost 3 full days and lived, unquote. A police sergeant named Johnson was investigating the case, made one last pointed remark, quote, whoever brought him back knew the terrain and was careful to leave him where he would be found, unquote.
That's right, Johns.
Yep. Case summary.
And it's weird that they always put him somewhere that had already been searched.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's maybe that's not always, but it happens a lot.
I wonder if that's like, if you like look at it from the perspective of the thing doing this, if that area has been searched, you're like, okay, they just went through this area. They're not going to be back in here for a little while. I've got time to drop the kid there while they're in some other spot. I don't know.
Yeah.
So in the summary, Paulides says, this is another incident where quality investigators and police officers saw the subtle signs of kidnapping versus someone being lost. I realize it's difficult to understand how 2 disappearances 60 years apart can be related, but the disappearance of Stephen Ford and Ronald Rumbaugh have too many similarities in geography alone not to be considered somehow related. Paulides says he's in no way blaming anyone in law enforcement for not connecting the dots. There are decades between cases and simply too many missing people. Okay. Eldridge Albright. Missing May 21st, 1941, 2 p.m. in Woodstock, Maryland. 3 years old. This case is placed in Pennsylvania because its proximity to other cases. So Mrs. Albright was staying with her son Eldridge at their grandmother's house in rural Woodstock. 2 p.m., Eldridge was playing in a creek bed 300 yards behind the home. The boy was with 2 family dogs. The mother was taking a nap. The grandmother, Cynthia... Now, so this is really important, this very first part. The point of disappearance here, this is why I included this case, because it's clear something happens. The grandmother, Cynthia, was on the back porch. So the boy's playing near the creek with 2 dogs, 300 yards away from the house. The mother's taking a nap. The grandmother's on the porch outside. Okay. She's on the back porch when she hears a distinctive scream for help coming from Eldridge in the creek bed. So she starts moving towards the creek, and she hears a second scream coming from further down the creek and farther away. And seconds after the second scream, she hears a muffled third scream coming from still farther away.
Wow, he's moving down the creek real fast.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's freaky.
So Cynthia, the grandmother, runs into the creek bed looking for the boy, but she doesn't see or hear anything. She runs a little further and finds 1 dog in a nearby meadow. She calls for the dog, but it doesn't flinch. It stands rock solid staring down the creek. There was no sign of the other 2 dogs that were with the boy. Cynthia runs back to the home and wakes the mother. They again go to the creek and search, find nothing. Cynthia calls the police. When the police arrived, she told them she believed that Eldridge was abducted because he was continually calling for help, and the calls kept getting further and further away until he vanished. Soon after the disappearance, many people volunteered to help search. State police came up with only one theory that made any sense. A tramp from nearby railroad tracks must have taken the boy, but they had no proof, and bloodhounds were brought to the farm, but they too were unable to find the boy. Searchers did find some tracks, but a May 22nd, 1941 article in the Telegraph Herald states police said tracks of the child were found in the sand by a stream for about 50 yards and then mysteriously disappear. Right? So there's the stream, there's tracks in the sand, and the tracks just stop.
Yeah, like he was picked up.
Picked up.
And whatever picked him up was in the water.
Right. Searchers scoured the area around the farm, and for the first 24 hours, they didn't find anything. Another search team had been working since 4 a.m. and was slowly edging toward a swampy area 4 miles from the house. They were making a lot of noise, and they thought they heard a slight whimper coming from under a rock ledge near a swampy growth of weeds. They approached and found Eldridge. He was groggy, appeared to be trying to wake up, although it was now 3 p.m. He was lying on a bed of leaves protected from the elements by the rock ledge. No shoes, clothes were torn badly. When searchers and family members asked Eldridge what happened and how he got to the rock ledge, he couldn't or wouldn't explain anything. When his parents asked what he had seen, he said only one thing, twains, which everyone interpreted as trains from the nearby railroad track. And that was all he said. So there you go. It was a strange disappearance. Twains. Okay. Joseph Prato, missing October 25th, 1941, 12:30 p.m., Bald Eagle Mountain, Williamsport in Pennsylvania. Age at disappearance, 19 months. Blonde hair. Okay, 2008 at 2008 feet, Bald Eagle Mountain is the highest peak in the area of Williamsport. The residence where Joseph lived was near the base of the mountain. Joseph wandered from his residence and disappeared in the area of the mountain. There was concern from the searchers that he could wander into water from the many sources that are near the residence. Many people didn't believe a 19-month-old boy could wander far, so thus many thought he was kidnapped. Searchers did scour the bottom of the mountain and the hillsides without finding anything on the first night. They were hindered because the area of the mountain near the home had very thick vegetation. Approximately noon the first day that he was missing, his brother Pete and other searchers were searching the base of the mountain approximately 2 miles from the residence, and they found Joseph lying on the ground, not moving. They ran to the boy and found that he was asleep at noon. He had his pants, shoes, and socks removed, even though temperatures had dropped to below 50 degrees the prior night. Joseph could not explain what happened to him because he was 19 months old, and it is not understood how the boy traveled 2 miles, stripped his clothes off, and still survived overnight. Okay, so case summary. The disappearance of Joseph occurred 1 year almost to the date from the disappearance of Rudy Kuchnick, which I don't think we went through.
So notice the previous case, that child was a little bit older, right? Like, how old was that child?
Yeah, the one we just finished before,
Yeah.
Eldridge. He was...
Is he 4 or 3 or something? I can't remember.
3. And then this one, and then Joseph was 19 months.
Now, the other boy that was walking with the bucket to get water, who was found later.
8 years.
Yeah, 8 years old.
Yeah. He was the one that was like grandfather.
Yeah. He wasn't missing clothes, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's like the older ones, they're not missing clothes usually.
Yeah.
Except maybe a
some
shoe or
some of the
something.
girls we were reading about last time, they were found completely naked, but they're 5, 6, 7, you know. Or just in their swimsuit, but that's what they disappeared in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, but it's like the toddlers
Are the ones losing
always
the clothes.
missing pieces of clothing, and they
Yeah.
just do that.
Okay.
Like that happens. The toddler comes back, and you're like, "Where are your shoes? Where's your jacket?"
Okay.
You got to go out there and find it, or just one shoe.
Right. Doesn't that make you like walk lopsided? They don't care, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got 3 cases marked in a row here. So the next one is Alvin Diggin, Montgomery, Pennsylvania, May 30th, 1942, 3 years old, blonde hair. Montgomery, Pennsylvania is 8 miles east of Bald Eagle Mountain. So 8 miles east of where the last case was, where Joseph was. The locations are on the same side of the Susquehanna River. Alvin was with relatives who were working a wild strawberry patch 1 mile from a farm where they were employed. Alvin had gone along and somehow became lost while his parents were picking the berries. Not long after the boy disappeared, Civil Air Patrol, local police, and sheriffs were all searching. Bloodhounds from the local penitentiary responded to the search, but were unable to pick up the boy's scent or refused to track. We don't know which. Many of the articles state that there were poisonous snakes in the region. Most of the searchers were wearing snake boots. The state police stated they killed 2 copperheads as they were conducting the search. A total of 150 searchers participated. 2 days of not finding the boy, Montgomery residents 2 miles from where Alvin was last seen heard someone sobbing in a small pine grove. Mrs. June Reed walked into the grove and found Alvin sitting on the ground crying. He was naked and lying on the ground. She transports Alvin to Muncie Valley Hospital, where his condition was listed as satisfactory. He had been cut by briars from head to toe, but otherwise was fine. There was very little information on Alvin after he was located, and the boy's clothes were never found.
That's weird.
Yeah. Next one. Eugene Shue, missing October 20th, 1946, 2 p.m. from Manheim, Pennsylvania. 3 years old. Rural Lancaster County, lived with his mother and the grandparents. The family lived north of Manheim in a rural location surrounded by swamps, forests, and a very rural environment. At approximately noon, Martha fed her son a sandwich and sent him into the yard with the family dog, Whitey. Mrs. Shue had to leave the residence for a short time. When she returned, Eugene and Whitey were gone. She searched the yard and the bordering woods but found no trace. Late in the afternoon that same day, searchers were scouting the woods near Eugene's residence and could not find a trace of the boy or the dog. They were looking at 2 creeks near the property. They were shallow, did not reveal any clues. They were more concerned about adjacent swamps. The second day of searching, they were moving further and further out. One team was 4 miles from the point Eugene was last seen and were at the top of Cornell Lookout. This location is the highest point in the region and is approximately 600 feet up from the residence location. At the bottom of the lookout, they found Eugene. They made a special note that they were shocked to see he didn't have any scratches, even though he had wandered through thick woods for 4 miles to reach the present location. They were also surprised to see Eugene on top of the highest mountain in the area, quite a feat for a 3-year-old. In a very odd twist, the dog was never located.
Whoa. That is crazy. What?
There are 12 disappearances in the 1940s of children ages 2 to 6 in Pennsylvania, which is an astronomical number compared to any other state. Break time?
So, yeah. I wonder how normal that was, like, in the 40s to just, like, oh, put the 3-year-old in the yard with the dog and leave the house.
Grandparents were there.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. But yes, I agree. In some of these, you're just like, wow, parenting's a lot different now. Way more helicopter.
More helicopters. Yeah.
All right.
For good reason.
Yeah. All right, we're taking a break, and we'll come back for the final segment and finishing this out.
A relentless and unstoppable pursuit of mysteries here on Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Perhaps this is not the final segment. We'll see. We're going to try to get through the rest of the book.
Maybe.
Before the end of the show. Maybe.
Yeah.
And, it's good stuff. Some of it's tough.
Yeah. Listen to. So, still in Pennsylvania. Next case is Billy Abbott. Missing February 18th, 1949, 4:40 p.m. 3 years old. Where's my calendar?
Sorry.
So the Abbotts lived in Laureldale. The home was at the base of Mount Laurel. The mountain used to have a small ski resort, and that's where Billy and neighborhood friends went to play in February of 1949. Somehow Billy became separated from his friends, and when they came home, they told his mother that he was missing. She promptly contacted local authorities, and a massive search was conducted. The first night of the search, firemen from 4 local communities directed bright spotlights onto the mountain where he was last seen. They used bullhorns to call his name, and hundreds searched the forest area. They were unsuccessful in finding him that first night. The parents, after that first night, told authorities their son would never walk off and not come directly home. They stated he was a very good boy, somewhat timid, but he knew that he should be home. They strongly believed he had been abducted. The first morning Billy was missing, search parties formed and searched. They combed every inch of the mountain meticulously. At 1 p.m., they reorganized and again started to comb the woods. 5 blocks from Billy's home, in a thick wooded area rich with deep leaves, a searcher saw something red lying in the trees. He walked up to the object and saw Billy lying on the ground sleeping. It was approximately 1:30 p.m. The searcher screamed for assistance, which woke the boy. He tried to carry him, but the boy stated he'd rather walk.
This is another thing that's in a lot of these stories is they're all asleep and just waking up from some weird kind of sleep, or the guy picks him up and he's unconscious.
Right. When they got Billy back to the home, the police officers at the residence made a note that the ground and the area of the search was quite wet, and yet Billy's boots were dry. They also noted that
the area was wet?
Yeah.
Okay.
The area of the search was quite wet, yet Billy's boots were dry. Almost dry. They noted he was not hungry, was in very good spirits, and his clothing wasn't dirty. They tried to question him about his experience, but were confused over his answers. He did state that he followed a neighbor's dog into the woods, but wouldn't state any more after that. He later saw one of the lawmen with a lighter and stated that he had played with one of those last night. The detectives asked him where he played with the lighter, and Billy stated, "At the house where I slept."
Man, that's weird.
He didn't elaborate on where he stayed, and in fact, almost stopped making statements at this point. So the case summary, Paulides says, everyone should consider these specifics listed below. He was with his neighbor's dog, walked into the woods, 4 p.m. Massive search, spotlights and loudspeakers, all of the noise and lights. Why wouldn't he respond? He stated that he stayed at a house. What does that mean? He played with a lighter. Where did this occur? The lawmen were so perplexed by his answers that they couldn't tell whether he was kidnapped, fabricating a story, or was just lost. Too many consistencies with Billy's disappearance and the disappearance of other youngsters in this book to ignore what he is saying. He was obviously in a location that was covered from the weather and appeared to be similar to a home. It could also be deducted that Billy was at a location far enough from the search noise and lights that he didn't hear the searchers calling.
That's crazy.
All right. Otis T. Mason. Missing October 11th, 1949, 5 p.m., Maryland. 6 years old, blonde hair. Otis was last seen by his mother playing in a sand pile in front of the house with the family's 3 dogs. He had 5 brothers and sisters, but they were not in the yard with him when he and the dogs inexplicably vanished. 5 p.m., Otis's mother called him for dinner, and when he didn't answer, she went into the yard to look. She couldn't find him. She called authorities. The Mason family had lived in their large home for 11 months, and the children knew the area. They also knew the rules about not leaving the immediate area. Several hours after Otis disappeared, 2 of the dogs returned home. The 3rd dog was still missing, along with the child. After he'd been gone for 24 hours, searchers near a vacant home 2 miles from the Mason residence thought they heard a strange muffled sound from an underground area. They pulled the lid off of an empty septic tank and found the missing dog inside. They could not explain how the dog managed to enter the tank, especially since the lid was on it. They scoured the woods behind the Mason home. The woods were a conglomeration of heavy timber, swamps, and thickets. The search extended 2 miles, couldn't find any evidence. Near the end of the second day, a police officer working a creek that had been searched several times before looked under a bank and found the boy's body, and people were shocked. The specific area where the boy was found had been searched several times. The creek was very shallow except for the 1 4-foot deep hole where the body was found. There was an autopsy. Officials ruled that the cause of death was drowning. The fact that Otis knew never to leave the yard and that he left with 2 of the dogs makes this case mimic others from this same area. It would be easy to discount this case and state it was merely a drowning, but the fact that the dog was found confined in a septic tank makes it seem as though something unusual happened.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that one, this is not a one where the kid was found alive, but I included it because of the dog in the tank.
That is weird.
6 years old.
What? So I guess it must be pretty common for missing people to be found, missing persons or whatever to be found in places previously searched. Common enough to where searchers are
Searching again.
looking again over the same places.
Yeah. Or the search party keeps getting larger and larger, and they go and when they can't find the person, they're like, well, let's go back and do this
Backtrack.
area,
Yeah.
like with much more people, and sometimes
Yeah.
they end up walking almost hand in hand,
Yeah.
and just combing a field when it's got tall grass and there's a little child. You know, you walk hand in hand because you can't, like, if there's really tall grass or if it's thickets,
you could be 20 feet away.
yeah, and just not see them. So yeah,
I was
go
thinking
back
about
and do
that
it
with
again.
the cornfields. It's like, man, that would be
Yeah.
a nightmare
Right.
trying to find somebody in the cornfield.
Yeah, you basically have to have somebody walk every row.
Yeah, that's
Especially if they're unconscious or dead.
yeah.
You know, when it's just a lost person and they're still alive, you know, calling. If they're out in a cornfield and you shout, they should hear you.
Yeah.
But so often they find the kids asleep, you know.
Some of these cornfields are gigantic.
Yeah, that's right.
You could totally get lost in there.
Okay. Anna Pearl Thorpe, missing May 5th, 1950, Dunbar, Pennsylvania, 2 years old. Anna was playing at the edge of the woods near her home. Anna's mother was inside the home when she heard a sharp scream. She ran into the backyard, can't find the girl, yells the child's name, immediately searched the area but could not find her. Anna's two brothers assisted in the search but could not locate her, and it was at this point that the Thorpes called local police. Hundreds of searchers converged on the property. By early the next morning, search and rescue teams scattered over the snake-infested woodlands looking for the young girl. They were covering the area inside of 1 mile from her house, as they didn't believe she could get much further than that. But one group did decide to search much further away. 24 hours after she disappeared, she was found 3 miles from her home, tucked under a blackberry bush. Naked except for one shoe. Her sweater and dress were lying on the ground next to her. She was taken to a nearby physician who stated that she had not been molested, only had minor scrapes and bruises. She was in almost perfect condition considering the amount of terrain she covered in 24 hours. A May 7th article in the Los Angeles Times had the following paragraph, quote, "State police took the child's clothes for further investigation. There is some mystery as how she got over 10 picket, barbed wire, and stone fences that separate the wooded area from in the field in which she was found." So she's 2 years old and she manages to get through all these fences.
Yeah, no way. But a lot of this stuff makes me think of like an actual animal abduction, right? That's like they're all scratched up, like it's sort of done.
Yeah, it just drags them
Yeah,
through the...
yeah.
Yeah.
There's no molestation or anything like that.
Right.
It's like,
So case summary.
kind of like what was the name of that gorilla? Humbabe or whatever his name was. Harambe. Yeah, he just like grabs the kid, drags him over there, and it's just like, you know, he's got like this.
Yeah.
He's not hurting him,
Yeah.
but I mean, the way he dragged him could have easily hurt him, but
Right.
it was not his intention.
Yeah. It's just a little rough and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think of that sort of deal. I don't know.
So Paulides says, pull up Google Maps and look at Cooser Lake in Pennsylvania and compare that to Dunbar. His estimate is that the distance between these two locations is approximately 10 miles. 10 miles and 26 months is the difference between the disappearances of Donald Collier and Anna Pearl Thorpe, which is the one we just read. There are many similarities between the two cases, and the time frames are too close to be ignored. In between the two locations where the children disappeared are Indian Creek Valley and two large state parks with massive open areas. There are no large cities between the two spots. So you see what I'm saying? At one end of a very wild area and the other end of a very wild area, you have two very similar kinds of disappearances taking place within time frames of each other.
Wow. Something living in those woods.
Yeah. I believe state police took Thorpe's clothing because they knew she had been abducted. There is no way a 2-year-old girl is going to travel 3 miles and over 10 barbed wire fences in 24 hours. There's no reason for police to take the clothing if this was merely a missing persons case. I could not locate a follow-up article explaining the police theory, and there is the possibility that police found something on the girl's clothing that caused them concern.
So they took the clothing into, like, as evidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, I've done enough reading on true crime cases to where you find out that a lot of times the police will...
Like hair gets caught in clothing.
They'll know a lot more than they're telling the public.
Oh, yeah.
And they just don't say because they're trying to... It has to do with either how they're trying to solve the case, or it's some evidence that where if they finally pull in a suspect, if this person knows a particular detail that the public doesn't know, then they can connect the things. Or they want an airtight case for prosecution and can't release certain details and won't until the case is solved. But sometimes they just don't get solved. The details never get released. It gets lost in cold case files and it just never comes out, right? So that's what seems like may have happened here. They took the clothing in because they thought a crime had been committed. Or an abduction happened, I should say. Is it a crime if it's being committed by a cryptid? You know, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's not a crime.
Right.
I mean, it's not a crime if a bear snags your child.
Right. But it's something more than a missing persons case, right?
Yeah.
So the police...
It is an abduction.
Right. The police were suspecting that something strange happened. They take the clothing in to get evidence. It's not clear what they thought they were getting from the clothes, or whether they saw something on the clothes, or whether they found something on the clothes, and those details have just never been released. And now the case obviously is cold because that took place in the 1950s. Okay. And I would suggest that it's probably not extremely high priority since she was found and alive, right? It's like, how much pressure is there to solve this case?
And not wounded or injured in any way.
Right. All right, next one. Jackie Copeland, missing May 14th, 1950, 1 p.m., Pleasantville, Pennsylvania, 2 years old, blonde hair. Jackie and his 3 sisters and parents went to a picnic at an oil company's property outside of Pleasantville. The family was socializing with others when Jackie's 7-year-old sister told their father that Jackie was gone. Family starts to look, could not locate him. Everyone at the picnic starts to participate. Very short period of time, state police arrive. They call for a team of bloodhounds. The oil company calls for additional volunteer searchers until there are hundreds of people looking for the boy. By late in the evening, the bloodhounds could not pick up a scent or refused to search, and the ground searchers were not having any luck. 8 a.m. the following morning, a man named Bevier was searching outside of the main area in a location where an oil repressuring plant was located. The area is completely surrounded by what many newspaper articles called impassable swamps. As Mr. Bevier and a crew of searchers were walking through the swamps, he accidentally saw Jackie looking around the side of a tree, like peering at him from around the side of a tree. Bevier called his name. Jackie answers. He was 2 miles from the picnic and across swamps that were deemed impassable. Transported to a hospital, met by his family. Examined by doctors, they said he had a number of scratches, but was in generally good health.
Once again, this...
An article in the Logansport Press, May 17th, had an interview with the Copelands and heard Jackie's rendition of what occurred in his night in the woods. The press wanted to hear how the boy got to his location in the swamp, what he had to drink or eat, and how he kept warm. Jackie first was asked why he left the picnic, and here is his quote. Quote, he saw something peering at him from behind a big tree. When he approached, the creature scampered into the brush, unquote. Jackie didn't explain anything more about leaving the picnic. The article later explained more of what Jackie stated. Quote, he recounted in Child Talk his adventure in an awful blackness, peopled by a great throbbing giant and a tall, friendly tree, and wild animals howling in the distance, and the unfamiliar shouts of strangers prowling nearby, unquote.
Whoa. That's freaky.
Jackie's explanation of what occurred to him could be a very sobering narrative of what might be possibly occurring with the plethora of missing children outlined in this book. He went through a very frightening experience. In the safety of his parents' presence, he was able to recount certain elements of what happened. He did say that he believed he slept through the entire night in the woods. How he was able to sleep under conditions he described as a true mystery. And yet many young children are found by searchers in groggy and semi-conscious states. So the question I pose to each and every reader, what was the creature peering at him from behind a tree? And is it ironic that Jackie mimics the behavior of the creature when he was approached by a searcher?
Yeah.
How could a 2-year-old boy traverse impassable swamps? I know many people will discount Jackie's explanation and say that it was fantasy, but the location where he was found was not a fantasy. And the description he gave of his incident is something we should all ponder and attempt to understand.
It's like...
So let's go back to this quote. He sees something peering at him from behind a tree. When he approaches it, runs into the brush, and presumably he follows it, but it says he had an adventure in an awful blackness, so that would be the nighttime, probably, peopled by a great throbbing giant and a tall, friendly tree, wild animals howling in the distance, and the unfamiliar shouts of strangers prowling nearby. So I wonder if the wild animals howling and the unfamiliar shouts of strangers are the search dogs and searchers.
Yeah.
But then you have to ask, well, what's the dang giant and the friendly tree? I mean, this sounds like Fae stuff, like a,
Yeah.
you know?
That's what I was going to say. It's like the Pied Piper. Like
Yeah.
he peers at him as soon as he makes eye contact with it. He's like hypnotized and just
goes after
off.
it, right? Like the
the
first
girl
case.
on the girl on the trail.
On the trail, yeah. Looks at something off trail, walks
Boom.
off in the woods.
Instantly just
Right.
in a...
Exactly.
And that's why they can't remember what.
Right. And when
why
people
they
call,
left.
they don't hear, they don't come. They're totally in a trance. And then when
Yeah.
they're found, they're still coming out of the trance.
Yeah, exactly. And you have missing time with people that
Yeah.
have had UFO encounters or abductions in that genre.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty much sounds like UFOs to me. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You're going full Laura in here.
I mean,
it was aliens, guys.
It's the stuff. I just the stuff that you encounter when you look at that.
Yes.
Those phenomena.
That's right.
You could use those things to explain all of this stuff. Pretty
right.
much.
Yeah. Use one mystery to explain another one.
Right.
Classic.
Obviously, the answer to this mystery is
Another
this total
mystery.
WTF over here.
All right. Harold Mott, still in Pennsylvania. Missing March 2nd, 1976, 5 p.m. from Corydon Township in Pennsylvania, 12 years old. A special ed student. 12-year-old Harold Mott arrived at his rural residence after school, decided to look for the family dog Snowball, which had been missing for several days. Harold, his brother, and a neighbor went to the hill behind the Mott residence and decided to split up looking for the dog, and this is when Harold disappeared. Once the other boys realized they couldn't find Harold, they went to his parents, explained the circumstances, and everyone starts to look. 5 p.m. And a strange and odd twist to the story, as the family was searching for Harold and it started to get dark, Snowball arrives back at the house. One missing party is found and another goes missing. Soon they call state police. So Corydon Township is 4 miles from the New York state line in far northern Pennsylvania. The town is just 2 miles from the Allegheny Reservoir and is adjacent to Willow Creek. The woods around the town are very lush and thick, with almost the consistency of a wooded area that has never been logged, with few home sites and no land that's been cleared. Harold vanished 5 miles west of the location where Marjorie West disappeared while going on an outing with her family in 1938, and she was never found. State police committed significant resources. Local sheriffs and other law enforcement officers came to the area along with farmers and families volunteering. There were equestrians, helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, and even psychics. On Wednesday and Thursday, violent thunderstorms rocked the region. Several inches of rain. Canines unable to pick up Harold's scent and couldn't locate the boy. Friday afternoon at 12:30 p.m., so that would be 3 days later. Yeah. 2 searchers were 9 miles from the Mott property, walking a rarely used trail, when they looked up and saw Harold. A March 6, 1976 article in the Bradford Era had the following statement from the searcher who found Harold. Quote, "He just came out of nowhere," unquote. Harold was walking with a walking stick and seemed to be in very good health. He immediately asked if Snowball had been found, and then continued walking with searchers back towards their vehicle. He was taken to Bradford Hospital by a state police officer. They said he had a slight fever, was groggy and tired, but would be kept for the night for observation.
Oh, man.
So, like, that sounds like missing time. He doesn't even realize he's been gone for 3 freaking days. He's like, did you guys find the dog, right? Like, he's still thinking he's got his whole walking stick.
Yeah, and somebody put into his mind that there's a giant search party looking for his dog.
Yeah.
So he's just like these guys that are out
They're
searching.
all helping
He's just like,
with the dog, yeah. So strange.
Had a fever.
So Paulides says in his case summary, this is fascinating because the dog is missing for several days, and then Harold disappears looking for the dog, and the dog appears on the same night that Harold goes missing.
Yeah.
And the fact that Harold disappeared in such close proximity to the disappearance of Marjorie West is something that can't be overlooked. This is another case in which a person is located in good health but has a slight fever. Why does he have a fever? I wonder if I can find that. I wonder why I didn't mark Marjorie West.
Man, I had some fevers when I was little.
I know. I always think
out into
I always
the
think of your fevers too when I'm reading this.
But I mean, easily could have just
Yeah.
wandered off into the woods in one
Right.
of those fevers.
And when you were in those fevers, at least once I walked behind you calling your name, and you never turned
Yeah.
around and never looked at me.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to West Virginia. First case in West Virginia is Shirley Ann Ramsberg, missing December 27th, 1957, 5 p.m., Charlestown, West Virginia, 3 years old. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Ramsberg lived in the rural area of Charlestown, or Charleston. Looks like Charlestown to me. 2 words. On the afternoon of December 26th, so the day after Christmas, winter weather was cold. Little Shirley Ann was playing in the family's yard with her dog, Brownie. She had been in the yard for approximately an hour when her father went to check on her. Couldn't find the girl, but did see the dog running down the mountainside beside the family home. He was alone, and Shirley was not in sight. Robert ran down the street to the nearest neighbor, and the 2 men searched the nearby hillside. The Ramsberg and nearby neighbors did not have a phone, thus authorities were not notified as the 2 men did not want to stop searching. They searched through the night with torches, still couldn't find her, and it was at this point that the neighbor drove into town and got assistance. Within hours after police were notified, 100 searchers were combing the hillside. Searchers brought in bloodhounds that tracked the girl from her home yard to the Shenandoah River, indicating to searchers that she must have drowned. The searchers used another bloodhound, and that dog also tracked to the same spot in the river, and then walked several feet into the river and stopped, again indicating the girl went into the river one way or another. Almost 2 days to the hour after she disappeared, searchers were walking a path 2 miles from the family residence when they found Shirley lying next to a tree. She was missing her shoes, her coat, and her socks, even though the temperature outside was very cold. Scratches on her face and arms, but she was quiet. She was transported to the hospital where doctors stated she was suffering from exposure. Search and rescue coordinators told the press that she was found at a location they had passed many times during the last 2 days. An article in the Dispatch, dated December 30th, stated, quote, "By late last night, she hadn't said a word. She just cried and cried," unquote. So, Paulides says, during my years of reading search and rescue and missing person reports, there have been many that indicated a canine tracked descent to a river and stops. Many of the handlers have taken the dog's reaction to mean the missing drowned. I think this action by the canine could be misinterpreted. Another logical explanation is that the missing person went to the river and crossed somehow to the other side. There have been too many instances where dogs tracked to a river and creek and the missing was found days later, still alive. And she's 3 years old. So did she cross a creek in December in West Virginia by herself? Or did something carry her across?
Yeah.
Is it raining?
Yeah, so do they? Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So do they take the dogs to the other side and sniff around on the other side?
I mean, they're thinking she's lost and she's
Yeah.
young, so they think she goes in the river and drown. They start dredging the river.
Yeah.
But you're right. They should check the other side, but nobody was thinking abduction in this case.
Right, yeah.
And even if you're an adult, are you going to cross a river in the middle of December in West Virginia? I don't know. How cold was it, Still freeze your legs.
Horribly cold.
Yeah. So, case summary. It would appear from the behavior of 2 different bloodhounds that she traveled into the Shenandoah River and either crossed or entered it. The noses of 2 dogs tracking to the same location do not lie. How she got into the river and across has only one answer. She was carried.
Which is amazing that they can track her down to the river if she was being carried.
Yeah.
I wish there was a way.
Tracking something. That's the other thing is when you're around.
I was going to say, I wish there was a way you could get the smell of the other thing and connect it to all these other, when that, like the clothes of one of the missing people probably has the scent of whatever
Took them.
abducted.
Yeah.
And then you put that in a safe place or somehow try to preserve it.
Yeah.
And then if it happens again on the other side of that giant wilderness area,
Yeah.
then you take a piece of that clothing or whatever, and then,
Yeah.
right, you collect this.
Collect these scent clues.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
The other thing is when these searches start from the yard of the house where they live.
And then go straight to a body of water.
Well, I just, there's many, many, many trails of this little girl around that house. And maybe she walked down to that river some other time.
True.
I just don't know. It's like, are these dogs trained to look for the most recent trail? Is that how they
the
work?
Strongest.
Yeah, the strongest scent, right? Otherwise, they're going to follow an old track, and you're going to track. The dog's going to go wander all over the place where that little girl has been. Instead, they're going to pick up the strongest scent and run towards that. Like that's how they would. But I don't know. This is why we need to talk to one of these dog trainers. Okay, Kentucky. Debbie Ann Greenhill. Missing August 9th, 1958, 8 p.m., Olive Hill, Kentucky, 2 years old. August 9th was a huge day in the life of the family of Mr. and Mrs. Earl Greenhill. The family was moving into a new residence, 1,000 feet from a beautiful 54-acre reservoir. The home sat 2 miles down a rut-filled dirt road and in the mountains alongside the city's water supply. The family had a long Saturday moving into the new home. Another family was already living there, and that family would stay in the home with them for a few days during the transition. While the move was taking place, Debbie Ann was playing on the side of the house alone. Mrs. Greenhill left Debbie Ann alone at 7:45 p.m. for 20 minutes. When she returned, she could not find the daughter. A search of the area was made by everyone in the house. They couldn't find the girl. Residents were screaming for her, but they did not receive a response. One member of the house called the local police, who called the sheriff's department, who in turn called the state police. After the full second day of searching, law enforcement officers felt that Debbie Ann must have been kidnapped. She wasn't inside the confines of the search area. Searchers didn't have an easy task. There were 2 violent rainstorms immediately after she disappeared, and they greatly hampered the efforts. The area was composed of rugged mountains, very thick berry bushes, trees, and brush. The home sits in a small valley. On the 3rd day of the search, local law enforcement was adamant that Debbie Ann had been kidnapped. They were convinced that the girl was not in the hills near her home. They called the FBI. On August 12th, so that would be 3 days later, 3 days after disappearance, the Tri-City Herald had the following paragraph, quote, Special Agent Charles Weeks said in Louisville that FBI agents have no evidence that Debbie was kidnapped, but he said 4 agents would offer FBI facilities to help in the search, unquote. This is an interesting aspect. The FBI doesn't get involved with searches for missing people, yet they are somewhat assisting. It was an interesting twist. Other articles confirmed that the FBI had 4 agents on scene the entire time of the search, a very large number considering the agency wasn't investigating the situation. Like normally you just have one guy there to collect data, right? But there's 4 agents. That might be PR. It's hard to tell. I do think PR does come into account. Like somebody calls the FBI and the FBI is like, well, it's going to look bad if we say no. I don't know.
Yeah. Or they weren't really investigating it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Send 4 agents.
Right. Right. And the FBI does state on their website that one of the things they get involved is the mysterious disappearances of very small children. So, right. They don't investigate normal missing people.
Yeah.
Unless somebody can prove a crime has been committed, and then it crosses state lines. That puts it into their jurisdiction. But strange disappearances of children is one of the things that they have been investigating since the beginning of the FBI. Some of their earliest cases involved high-profile cases of disappearing small children. Okay. During this point in the search, the local reservoir was dragged, but searchers found nothing. Bloodhounds were brought in. They failed to pick up the scent. On the 13th of August, one day after the majority of searchers had left, a National Guard searcher working approximately 3/4 of a mile from Debbie's residence heard a small girl crying. They followed the sounds and found her crying 150 feet up from the reservoir with a berry-stained face, sitting on the ground. She was carried down to the water and taken by boat to a waiting ambulance. She was examined by a pediatrician who gave the following statement, quote, Dr. William Schnitzker, Ashland pediatrician, said Debbie Ann must have lived on berries, which grow thick and wild in the area. There was little evidence of malnutrition, although she was very hungry, unquote. She'd been missing for 90 hours without food and water, and the doctor stated she was in a remarkable condition. Also stated she had lots of cuts and abrasions. An article in the Charleston Gazette stated, quote, the child was naked, her blonde curls matted, body scratched, bruised and insect bitten, but she was declared in remarkably good condition. So once again, naked, berries. So case summary. This case is like many, many others in this book. Law enforcement officials strongly believe the victim is kidnapped, yet he or she later is found in an area that had been previously searched. Are they so incompetent that their assumptions are wrong? I don't think so. So many inconsistencies in the stories that they can't be ignored. As with many other children who go missing and are later found, she was found missing clothing and scratches over her entire body. And berries seem to be involved in many of these cases.
Yeah, it does sound a lot like the Fae. I mean,
yeah, it does.
God, it's so weird.
Okay. Now we're in New England. Horace Marvin Jr. Missing March 4th, 1907 in Delaware. 4 years old. Paulides says this is probably one of the highest profile missing persons cases ever in the United States in the early 1900s. Dr. Marvin had recently moved his family from Iowa to Delaware. Shortly after they arrived, Horace Marvin disappears from the yard. Very few initial details on the case. Many thoughts of kidnapping and other bizarre theories proliferated at the beginning. From the first day the boy went missing, the search instantly became massive. Searchers were carrying torches on the property every night for over a week. It was a 24-hour effort. Dr. Marvin was raising wheat. After days of searching for Horace without success, they burned the fields in an attempt to locate the boy. When the search was 2 weeks old, local authorities became frustrated and wanted to terminate the search operations, but Dr. Marvin got the governor and local federal authorities to intervene. Serious dad here. U.S. Secret Service actually got involved in the case along with other law enforcement jurisdictions. They were so convinced Horace was taken against his will that there were headlines stating the boy was kidnapped. The doctor stopped working for months, concentrating exclusively on search efforts. Every inch of the farm was examined in minute detail with no evidence found. He hired the Pinkerton detectives to interview ranch hands, locals, and law enforcement personnel. No leads. Local law enforcement officers sent detectives to Iowa to research the family history to ensure the kidnapping wasn't a family issue. 2 months after Horace Marvin Jr. disappeared, a local hunter was crossing the Marvin farm and was walking through a bog when he saw a small bulge. The hunter went to the bulge and found the decomposing body of Horace Marvin Jr. It would be fair to say that everyone involved was shocked. The exact area the body was found had been searched and the area combed dozens of times with no one finding this body. The coroner had an inquest. No broken bones, but the coroner also stated that the body showed over 40 hours of privation. This meant that the boy was alive for at least 40 hours after he went missing. It doesn't make sense to the searchers that Horace would lie down and die in this spot. An article in the Telegraph stated the following, quote, "To have reached the spot where the body was found, the boy must have walked across frozen and snow-covered fields in the face of a driving wind and then climbed 2 high embankments besides crawling through barbed wire fences. The official cause of death was listed as exhaustion. There was no uniform acceptance of any theory about what happened. It doesn't make sense he would leave the confines of his farmyard and head into atrocious winter weather and die in the bogs. And it also makes no sense the body wasn't located when searchers were scouring this area, and it appears there months later."
Okay, I'm confused. They burned the wheat fields, but it was snow covered?
I guess.
Or did it snow a month later?
So it was. He disappeared on March.
So maybe they had a late.
Let's see. Yeah, after days of searching, they burned the fields in an attempt to locate the boy.
So it must have snowed like. It was snowing when he disappeared.
Yeah.
But how do you?
I don't know. How did they burn the fields?
How do they burn the fields in March? Like when did the crops start growing? Wheat.
I guess they were the. I guess they were the. It's the old stuff. I don't know. Good question.
Covered in snow. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But
yeah. Do we need to stop? I heard thunder. Do we need to pause for a while? I mean, I know we're already over time. We can end the show, but I still have at least four cases left.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
I'll look at the. We'll look at the radar.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. There is a storm outside, so we're going to wrap this up quick. Got a few more cases here. This is Missing 411 Eastern United States by David Paulides. I can't recommend these books enough. Check out the show notes for links to go buy the books. Like I said multiple times, we've only read a few cases, and there are hundreds in these books. In this book specifically. So this is LCM Davis. So this case is a little different from the ones we've been going through. I included this because obviously it has strange elements that interested me, but this is a 24-year-old young woman. We're still in New England here. This is in Maine. She went missing. Where's my calendar? God dang it, Kyle.
All right.
July 30th, 1911. In Howe Hill in Maine. 24 years old. Elsie was a beautiful young organist at the church in Bethel in Maine. On Sunday, she attended and played at service, then went to her home. Sometime around noon, she vanished. Her parents looked for her, but she couldn't find her. Generally felt she must have wandered off into the woods behind her house. Because of the concern that she may be lost, a search was initiated. A volunteer group found her comb and several footprints in the hills behind her home. Over 800 people volunteered in the search. No significant progress was being made after that initial find. At the end of the third day of searching, a Portland, Maine clairvoyant, so a psychic, hand wrote a note indicating where Elsie was going to be found, stated she would be in a tree deep in the woods, and the searchers needed to look up to find her.
Wow.
Late in the afternoon on the fifth day of the search, volunteers combed an area almost 3 miles into very rugged and thick woods. They found a number of her personal items, hosiery, coat, shoes, scattered on the ground. They continued further into the woods until they heard a stick break. They continued deeper into the woods, and under a large pine tree, they thought they heard something above them. 20 feet up into the tree, they saw a scantily clad Elsie Davis.
That's insane.
They called to her, but she didn't answer. They made their way into the tree and found the woman unable to speak and quite confused. They were able to bring her to the ground, and her father eventually made it to a point where they understood each other. She didn't say anything to her father, but did lay her head on his shoulder. An article in the Lewiston Daily explained what had happened when Elsie got to her home. Quote, "At her home tonight, where she had been put to bed immediately after she arrived, Miss Davis was questioned briefly regarding her movements. She seemed able to recall only a little. In fact, her memory appeared to have lapsed shortly after she reached the woods Sunday until she was discovered in the tree today. She said she remembered leaving the church Sunday morning." Unquote. The Syracuse Morning Herald explained the condition that Elsie was found in by doctors. Quote, "Miss Elsie Davis will probably recover, although slowly, from the remarkable fever and delirium of which she has been a victim." Unquote. So again, a missing person is found with a fever and various other symptoms that match many others. In an interesting twist, the same article describes searchers finding the bed of opine boughs. How would Elsie have known to comfort herself in that manner? Through all the questioning, investigators never were able to determine how she lived for 5 days in the woods.
Like pine boughs?
Yeah. So they basically found signs that something had been camping rough in the woods.
Yeah.
Case summary. Many of the children you read about in this book are found after being reported missing and are too young to speak, or have a disability and are unable to speak. Some are reported to be in a state of confusion and choose not to speak. The Davis case exemplifies the condition that is found in very small children. People seem to lose their memory at the point they go missing and then recover once in the presence of other people. It's almost as though the missing are under some type of spell that eliminates memory and the ability to speak. If searchers had not specifically been looking up in the tree, it would appear that Elsie would not have been able to call to them because she could not speak. This case has every element we have seen in many other cases: loss of clothing, inability to remember what happened, disappearance from a rural area, knowledge of the area in which they disappeared, fever, and found in a state of confusion. And then, of course, there is the weird...
clairvoyant.
The psychic, yes.
That's awesome. Wow.
So, yeah. How many times how often has this happened? The body's never found because it's just up in a tree, like a small child way up in the tree. They just never find it. You know, how would you even...
Is this why they're often like in the middle of a briar patch because there was a tree in there and they were up there and they fell off?
They fall down.
And they're unconscious?
Yeah, or somebody finds the bones years later and it's just bones beneath the tree.
That's terrible.
Okay. Edward Gately, Brighton, Massachusetts. October 27th, 1917. Or, yes, 1917. 2 years old. There were 2 children that comprised the Gately family. Edward was 2, and the family had a new baby who was still not walking. 10:30 a.m., Mrs. Gately put Edward in the backyard with his apple and told him to stay on the step while she took care of the younger one in the house. Edward was wearing a large overcoat, diaper gaiters, pants, and shoes that were tightly tied to his feet. Mrs. Gately checked on Edward just minutes after she put him in her backyard and found that he had somehow disappeared. She immediately starts to yell, receives no answer, calls the police, search starts. The Gately residence was within 4 blocks of Brighton High School and a large quarry that was full of water. There was also a large abandoned and vacant lot near the home. It was thoroughly searched in the early search and rescue process. An article in the Boston Globe stated that the area around the quarry and vacant lot could look like a wilderness area in a child's mind. As the night and search proceeded, a thunderstorm hits the area at midnight, wiping out all tracks. The searchers were getting desperate. More police were brought to the residence in the early morning hours. At 6:30 in the morning, Sergeant M.J. Muldoon was looking through the outskirts of the vacant lot near the quarry and found the child calling Mama. The 29th article in the Boston Globe stated, quote, Sergeant Muldoon hastened to a clump upon the form of Teddy, or Edward, stark naked and blue from exposure to the elements. Close by to his form was a pile of baby clothing, overcoat, hat, undershirt, underwear, drawers, pair of overalls, shoes, and stockings, drenched from the heavy thunderstorm shower which broke shortly before midnight. The article also stated the child was delirious and taken to the hospital for a 2-day stay. Edward and his clothes were taken to his parents. The parents saw the pile of clothes and adamantly stated there was no way he could dress himself or remove the clothing. The mother found the T-shirt inside out and the shoes pulled off the feet. They demanded an investigation. They felt he had been forcibly abducted. The lot where he was found was thoroughly searched the night before he was found, and then he was found exactly where searchers had already been looking. It is apparent from this case that someone took him, moved him, stripped him of his clothes, and then gently placed him under the cover of bushes. There was never a mention of molestation, so why were his clothes removed?
Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah.
If the kid was able to do it, most likely the clothes wouldn't be in a pile.
Right. They'd be scattered.
Yeah.
All right. This is in New York. Brenda Jean Dowd, missing July 6th, 1958 from Eagle Pond, age 5. So readers should first take note that Brenda disappeared exactly 2 years after Diane Abbott vanished from Hebron in Maine, exactly 100 miles directly east of Diane's location. Eagle Pond is located in far northern New York, approximately 16 miles south of Malone, just outside the Titusville Mountain State Forest. Very rural and rugged area with many lakes, creeks, and rivers. Eagle Pond is approximately 1,500 feet long and 750 feet wide. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Dowd took their daughter Brenda with them to the pond to build a camp for vacation. Sometime on July 6th, she disappeared and her parents called local law enforcement. The day after she disappeared, the area was hit by heavy rains, which caused searchers additional problems. Bloodhounds, 200 volunteers, 2 helicopters, and 2 Army National Guard units searched for 2 days without finding the young girl. The 50th hour of the search, 2 miles from the camp, they were covering a swampy region with numerous downed trees and thought they saw something odd. The men approached the object and found Brenda. She was missing her shirt, shoes, socks, and pants, and was wearing just panties, but she was in good condition. They were attempting to understand how she disappeared for such a long period of time and how she managed to eat and drink. She was very quiet about her experience, except to explain what she observed. An article in the Stars and Stripes had the following, quote, Scott said Brenda enjoyed telling of her experience. She had seen 3 bears, 2 asleep, and 1 awake, he said, unquote. What did Brenda really see in the woods? What happened to her clothes that were never found? And how did she eat and drink while she was missing?
How old was she again?
5.
5, yeah.
Okay. Vermont. Alfred J. Bishop, Reading, Vermont. Age at disappearance is unknown. Went missing November 3rd, 1926. Alfred Bishop and his friend Morris left their residence in Felchville and traveled a short distance to their hunting area. So this is not a child. The men arrived early in the day and decided to split up and meet back at their cars at an agreed upon time. Alfred never comes back. Once Morris realized his friend wasn't going to arrive, he searched the immediate area of their cars and then headed to the Springfield to get additional assistance. 24 hours after Alfred disappeared, the searchers found his body under very strange circumstances. The Lewiston Daily ran the following description. Quote, Bishop's body was found beside an abandoned road in the woods near the summer camp of Attorney General John G. Sargent. There were evidences of a terrific struggle in the snow, which was beaten down for a distance of 60 paces around the body. Strewn about in different directions were Bishop's rifle, coat, and gloves, unquote. The article also stated the state's attorney said he was puzzled by the lack of bloodstains. A preliminary investigation disclosed no wounds on Bishop's body, unquote. The body was sent for autopsy. The Bridgeport Telegram had an article that described the autopsy result. Quote, an autopsy was performed today on the body of Alfred Bishop of Felchville and failed to dispel the mystery of the young man's death during a hunting trip. No external marks of violence were disclosed on the autopsy, unquote. Later in the same article, it had this describing the area where Alfred was found. Quote, the snow had been trampled over a considerable area, and there was every evidence of a terrific struggle, unquote. So that's just a strange one because of the struggle, but no wounds.
It was the coroner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Perfect cover.
Right. And of course, the last person to see him is the friend on the hunting trip. So that would be the first person they would suspect, right?
Yeah.
But how did he kill him? No wounds.
Yeah.
Not clear how he died. You know, the guy didn't shoot him. But it's clear that he died right there. There's this big struggle, and his rifle and his gloves and other stuff were found all strewn about in that same area. So he encounters something as a big struggle with it.
Or it was just made to look like a bear fight, or like a struggle with a bear or something.
Right. But there's just no signs that a bear killed him. How would a bear?
No. I mean, like it was set up.
Right. And then Ty, when we were talking about this the other night in here, Ty was wondering if the guy had a seizure and rolled all through the snow.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But I wonder if they would be able to tell that if it killed him. I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
But you think they could tell the difference? Could they tell the difference between a terrific struggle and somebody rolling around and a seizure? I don't know. It's a good question. Good point too. Okay. Just a few more cases here. New Jersey. Unknown first name, last name Borofsky. Missing July 1st, 1892 in Bridgeton, New Jersey. 6 years old. The Borofsky boy disappeared in a rural area where he lived in Carmel, New Jersey, 3 miles east of Bridgeton, 4 miles northwest of Millville. The area is rich with swamps and water, and just west of Union Lake. Teams of searchers scoured the swamps for 4 days. Heavy thunderstorms during these days that made the searchers face treacherous conditions. There are a few facts surrounding how he disappeared, other than that it was from the area of his residence. On the 4th day, nearly everyone had given up finding the boy except for a beehive hunter, David Carmen. He was over a mile from the Borofsky residence in very thick swamps when he heard a faint cry. The Weekly Herald had an article. Quote, "The child was found hanging over a bush. There was at least 2 feet of water surrounding the bush. The bushes within the child's reach had been gnawed and eaten, and the clothes were torn from the little one while blood streamed from the wounds and gashes on his body and legs. The skin and flesh on his legs were torn off, and hands were badly lacerated and shrunken. Doctors examined Borofsky and felt he may not survive because of pneumonia, but there were no follow-up articles about his condition. So it's not clear if he survived. They found him alive, but it's not clear if he survived it. So, Paulides says in his summary, all readers now need to reread the statement, "The boy was found hanging over a bush." I doubt he thrust himself onto the bush to hang there. I doubt he placed himself in the middle of the swamp. It appears to me as though the boy was being carried through the swamp thickets, being ripped and scratched, and as searchers got closer, the boy was placed safely on top of a bush, and the suspect escaped. Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But it was just one guy, right? I mean, the search was pretty much...
Yeah, the search was over except for one dude who was still looking. Okay. New Jersey, George William Billy Dancy, missing October 8th, 1919. Hamilton in New Jersey, 30 months old. Hercules Dancy and his family moved to Hamilton from Pittsburgh. They settled into a rural residence. On October 8th, 30-month-old George William, or Billy, asked his mother if he and Jack could go into the yard to play. Jack was Billy's 3-year-old fox terrier, so a dog. The two were inseparable. Mrs. Dancy said they could go outside. After a short time, Mrs. Dancy went into the yard and couldn't find Billy or Jack. She walked towards the nearby field and the surrounding swamps, but couldn't find them. She calls the police and the father. Over the next several hours, police requested all available resources. From the start of the search, they were frustrated with the lack of clues or tracks. It wasn't until late on the first day that Jack walks back into the yard. That's the dog. The family took the dog back towards the field and swamp and asked, "Where is Billy?" And the dog looks down and refused to move. The first night of the search, the weather started to turn bad, stayed bad on and off for many days. Several times rain fell very hard in the search area. One of the searchers working in a remote area found one of Billy's toys and described it as being smashed. They also found an abandoned home deep in the woods where someone had been sleeping.
Oh, man.
In the early days of the search, police made several statements that they had believed Billy had been kidnapped. They said the evidence didn't add up, Posters printed about the boy were distributed throughout the United States, indicating there was a $1,400 reward for his return. This was in 1919, so that was quite a bit of money. They actually arrested an owner of a nearby farm. The theory behind why and how the man killed Billy didn't make a lot of sense, as it appeared as though the police wanted a quick ending to the case. The man was later released after parents publicly stated that they doubted the police theory. They followed leads across the continent, some very frustrating. People stated they had the boy, but they didn't. There were very cruel hoaxes pulled on the Dancy family. But 6 weeks after Billy disappeared, a hunter was deep in the swamps and came across what appeared to be a body. He notified police, and they determined that Billy had been found. He was located in an area surrounded by 1 to 2 foot deep swamps in a very rough and thick location. The police immediately stated that Billy had been abducted and dumped. They did not feel he could get there under his own power. Portions of his clothes were hung on bushes near the body, but he was essentially naked except for his shirt. The body did not suffer bone fractures, but the flesh had been eaten off the bones. They were in a formation showing they had not been disturbed significantly from the time of death. An article in the New York Times had the following, quote, "There was no blood found, and on that account there can be no bacteriological tests made of any of the clothing. It is a pity he was not found earlier," unquote. So, clothes were found off the body, but there was no blood on the clothing, meaning the clothes had been removed prior to the body being ravaged by animals. Later in the same article is this, quote, "Detective Wilson this afternoon told me that he was certain that the boy never got into the woods where he was found by himself because it would have been necessary for him to force his way through the quagmire and the underbrush, and it would have exhausted his physical strength. The boy, in the judgment of Detective Wilson, was carried to the place where he met his death. Wilson has not found a mark or a button which would be of assistance in unraveling this mystery," unquote. There was an inquest into the death. The inquest rehashed the points made by Detective Wilson and added one additional important point. The inquest revealed that it was known by the family that Billy could not undress himself, but his clothes were found inside out. It was also revealed that 10 days before Billy disappeared, his dog had received some type of head injury while playing by itself. The exact cause of the injury could not be determined, and they did not know if it was related.
Yeah, that's weird. It's
So
weird how the dogs all are tied into these stories. It's
right.
So strange.
The difference between the Dancy case and dozens of others in this book is that detectives understood that the factual circumstances surrounding the disappearance were odd and didn't make sense. He was found in the middle of a swamp. His clothes were removed. He died. His clothes were removed by someone other than him, probably something that has happened to other children in this book, but probably wasn't addressed by the press, search and rescue personnel, or law enforcement. This case was very public, and the facts surrounding it caused many to be concerned. Okay, yeah, and he talks about the dog, too. He wonders what the dog saw and how it received its injury, and if that had anything to do with it. All right. Final case. Richard Peterson. November 5th, 1982, 3:30 p.m. from Delmont in New Jersey, 6 years old. On Friday, November the 5th, Richard and Brian Peterson were visiting their grandparents' home in a rural area of Delmont. It sits 2 miles north of Delaware Bay, less than 1 mile from the Heislerville Fish and Wildlife Management Area, and 1 mile from Bella Plain State Forest. There are very few homes in the area, and it sits in a region with acres of standing water. The entire area around Delmont is very wild and filled with open space and wildlife. Richard and Brian were playing in the yard at their grandparents' when the grandmother realized that both boys disappeared. She did a cursory search of the yard in the immediate area, couldn't find either of them. Searchers started to arrive at the house at 4 p.m., and by 5:30, Brian had been found 1/2 mile from the house in a wild and remote region. Searchers started to accumulate and expand the search without finding Richard. Over 300 searchers had joined the hunt for Richard by Saturday morning. The searchers included soldiers from Fort Dix and surrounding armed forces bases. They were getting very concerned for his welfare as it was very cold. There was a very cold stretch of weather in New Jersey. On Sunday, a hunter, Frank Madden, decided he was going to go into the woods to check his hunting blinds. At 8 a.m., he thought he heard a slight moaning sound. He stopped, listened, heard nothing. Started walking again, and then heard a similar sound to crying. Followed the sounds to an area near an abandoned sawmill.
Again,
the third
what?
sawmill in this. Yeah. found Richard lying naked on the ground. An article in the Philadelphia Daily News had the following statement. He couldn't raise his head. I guess that's why he couldn't holler loud, Madden said. The boy was glassy-eyed and weak, and his pants and shoes were missing. I tried to talk to him, but he was just staring way off. The only thing I could understand was in the woods all night, or something like that. Like he thought he was delirious from being in the woods out all night. So Madden checked and found the boy did not have any broken bones, so he wrapped him in a blanket and carried him to the nearest home. He was transported to a hospital and placed in a warm bath to raise his body temperature. Scratches over his entire body, and his clothing was never found. So this was in November in New Jersey. Found in a daze like many children, missing all of his clothes, but somehow didn't freeze to death.
God. And the first boy was found, like, not too far away, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Doesn't say anything about that one. What was his story?
Yeah, I don't know. All right.
I'm glad that's over. It's rough listening to those stories, man.
I have like 4 more of the books that we got to go through, but you know we'll spread it out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's just feel bad for these people.
Yeah.
So many of these people that go through that, you know, empathize with the one where the guy spent all the money and burned the field and had this gigantic
stopped working and
yeah, and then they find the body on his own property where they had looked. Like that must have been that must have just, you know, that'll ruin your life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because he's like, he was right there.
Yeah.
We didn't look hard enough. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's just, God.
And then there, you know, I think of the.
Just feel for these people.
I always think of the last person, you know, like when it's like the mother says, "Watch this boy."
Yeah.
God, you know, or the grandparents that goes to stay with the grandparents and then it disappears and the grandparents are devastated, you know, and you just have to wonder like what happens in that family. The parents are like everybody's blaming.
It'll tear them apart.
Yeah, in some cases,
destroy them.
In some cases, Paulides says that, like, you know, the grandparents are in, like, basically like what amounts to an ancestral home. Like, it's been in the family for generations, right?
Yeah.
But their kids have moved to a city, and they've got children, and then the children come and stay at the grandparents' house, which is like the family home that has been there for generations. And then the kid goes missing and is never found, and the grandparents abandon the property because they can't even stand to be there anymore. You know, it's just like it's rough.
Yep.
So this book is also the one that has the Dennis Martin case in it, which is an enormous case with lots of details. But David Paulides goes over the details of that case on many of the shows that he's been on and been interviewed in. So I didn't go through it here, but it's, you know, now Dennis was never found. No trace of him, but it's another one of those ones where he's basically within sight of everybody. He's playing with a bunch of other kids. They're having a picnic up on this hill, and he goes into the bushes and just never comes out and is never seen again.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it's tough, but it's worth understanding what's going, or trying to understand what's going on here. I think it's a worthwhile investigation into a modern mystery. But
yeah,
it's been
I would
going
say
on for centuries.
I would say a number of the cases in this book could plausibly be explained by human activity.
Absolutely.
But there are a few that really don't make any sense, especially when the accounts from, you know, the abductee are talking about giant, you know, bears and
friendly trees.
Yeah.
Or the young woman is just found up in a tree wearing nothing.
Yep, it's very strange. But it's like, it's the same way that I look at the UFO situation. A lot of those cases can be explained by mundane things.
Yeah.
But then there's
Then there are the ones that just can't.
Yeah, they just can't. And then when you see the similarities with one that you maybe could come up with a plausible, mundane explanation for, but you're like, man.
Yeah.
But it's so similar in so many different respects.
It can't be that way. Yeah.
That's really where the key is. It's so maybe. So what he's doing, what Paulides is doing, is picking all these out because of the similarities. And yes, maybe some of them coincidentally have those connections.
Right.
But there's undoubtedly some where it's not a coincidence. Like that is an actual true connection.
Yep.
Even if you could blame the coroner or the farmer next door or whatever.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. There are a few cases where you're like, okay, this can't have a mundane explanation. And then when you see that the pattern of those cases matches these other cases that could have mundane explanations, that starts making you wonder if they're also not mundane.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in the case where you're like, well, it could have been the granddad, or could be the kid just got lost, but why is there a sawmill? All right.
Traveling by water. I mean, that's a known thing. A criminal would know that they could be hunted by dogs, and so they may travel in a creek.
Absolutely.
Actually, in the creek.
Yeah.
But yeah, the point is made.
Right. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that. You can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. And you guys know all the rest. Thanks to History Shift. Thanks for Jeff and everybody else. This show has gotten really long. Thunderstorms outside. We love you. Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work. Stop the show. Dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
I need to thank some people. Number one, want to thank executive producer of this episode of Brothers of the Serpent podcast, Jacob Paulides. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He says, 5150. Thank you, buddy. Psychiatric hold in California. People think I am crazy for thinking the things y'all discuss on the show. I just started reading Forbidden Archaeology thanks to you. Keep rolling. Much Thanksgiving. Jake the Snake Paulides.
Nice. I also have one. First, let's say thanks to all the people who have been signing up to the Patreon. I appreciate it. But a special shout out goes to Justin, who signed up as a Snake Force commander at $36 a month. Thank you so much. Didn't that happen last time we tried to do this?
It's because I unplugged the hard drive because of the storm.
The storm.
That's all I got for you, bro.
Yeah.
Commander.
Thank you guys so much. And we'll keep posting Patreon content. So check it out. And we'll see you later next week.
Later.
Yep.